A soldier, an airman, and a Marine walk into a room. This show is The Punchline. My name is Ryan Smeltz, and you're watching Veteran Talk Show. All right, guys. So in case you don't know, we are an affiliate for Soldier Girl Coffee Company. I'm super excited about this because they have amazing coffee. And in future episodes, you will see us drinking Soldier Girl coffee. They also have a CBD coffee. So if you need some CBD, which helps support your health in a sense of relaxation, it helps with your sleep and your overall health on a day-to-day basis, then Soldier Girl coffee has both that and the caffeine you need. So be sure to check out the link in the show notes. Go ahead and click that, shop around, and make sure you get yourself some Soldier Girl coffee today.
Right on. Boy, the technological challenges, I'll tell you.
It's all fun and games until it doesn't work, right?
Yeah, well, I don't understand. It was working like 20 minutes ago. You know?
I blame the user to my left here.
They say plan is a series of events that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
What's up, man? I appreciate you coming on. I already hit record, but we can talk a little bit beforehand if you want. Because I know you're still in, and we had warrant officer Great White Buffalo on, and he's active. So then he was like, hey, cut this out, change this, whatever. So I haven't put that episode out yet because it's going to take a lot of editing. So if there's anything that you want us to avoid specifically, or if we're talking and later on you say, hey, I want you to cut that out, just let me know. So when I edit it, I can catch it.
Yeah, no worries. I kind of prep myself for that in terms of, you know, I'm not worried about it, but I appreciate the, you know, being cognizant of that, just because whoever sees this could be, oh yeah, that guy, you know, he said this and it was derogatory in nature, blah, 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 or whatever. But, you know, at the same time, I'm like, well, you know, I got to say, you know, this is kind of a freedom of expression type of thing. So I believe in the concept of the talk show itself. So I don't think Joe Rogan edits out shit on his show, you know, depending on who he has on there.
Yeah. And I think that's one reason why, because Joe and I have had conversations about, you know, what if down the road we get big enough and a network or a streaming channel or something reaches out.
Oh,
and
dreams.
We just kind of want the freedom to put out what we want to put out. So, I mean, personally, if we've got an episode that hasn't gone up yet, but we talk about ivermectin and abortion and a bunch of other stuff, and we're like, hey, if that episode gets demonetized or our channel gets shut down, then I guess it is what it is. You know, we're on plenty of places that I don't think it would affect us too much because we're not that big either.
Yeah, well, that also might help. You know, what's that? The guy who has a YouTube channel. There's those two black guys or whatever that talk about all
the Hodge Twins.
Yeah,
what twins?
And
The Hodge Twins.
I've not even heard of this.
They were both in the Marines, I believe.
Something like that, yeah. And
the Marines are the Army.
They just do wild shit, huh?
Oh yeah, they just.
I would say they're slightly political, and mostly entertainment, but they're kind of right in line there. They're the ones that sell the white privilege card and the race card.
What do they call? What is this thing called?
The Hodge Twins.
Hodge Twins.
They're two black guys and they're twins, and they have a show.
Okay,
I'll have to
look for it.
They're right up there with
my
John
YouTube is
Burke.
like I watch like clips of old shows and movies that I've seen a million times. It's like that's pretty much the extent of my YouTube. So.
Yeah.
And I don't have TikTok.
So
no, I don't have TikTok either. So
good. Resist it.
I don't see the concept in it. I'm just, for me, I don't have social media. I have obviously an Instagram for my dog and a LinkedIn for professional reasons. But
hell yeah, that's the only social media I have too is LinkedIn. I don't even do Instagram for my dogs.
He's got one. What's your dog's name again?
Zeus the surf dog.
Zeus the surf dog.
Yeah,
my dog.
Yeah, he literally. No, he loves it. I mean, we have obviously a wake boat and we go surfing behind it, and he just loves to get on that board and surf. And we started taking pictures and videos, and obviously women tend to like a small little Yorkie that wants to with a little life vest. And before I got with my girlfriend now, it was kind of it was a fun time.
That was your chick magnet.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't. Yeah, he was. He's a cool little boat dog, and next thing you know, I made a lot of friends. He was a good. So that's all. That's what I have to say about that. But it was quite a lifestyle, and so he's still, he's still cool and that stuff. He's because I had two dogs, and Ryan knows recently lost one, so that was a tough time. It's been a tough time, but Zeus has been kind of the man behind the camera. But the reason I got rid of social media, I think there is some social media presence. Me and Ryan were talking about this in terms of a business perspective, that it can be a necessity. But a couple of years ago, obviously, I'm in the airline industry, and when the airlines were starting to go down, I was looking at another job. Ryan, I don't know if I told you this, but it was kind of a weird sequence of events where I got a conditional offer to work for a 3-letter agency to fly for them. And so that was one of the reasons why I was like, oh, maybe I should get off social media. And granted that they could probably find anything that they wanted to find, but I was like, well, make it a little bit harder for them, for whatever reason. At least they didn't want to have that published to be in the eye of potential future employment, if you know what I mean. And since then, I just kind of been living life. I mean, that's the way to go in terms of not having social media.
Yeah, I deleted Facebook back in 2012, and I've been so happy about it. It was the best. It was the best decision I think I've ever made for my own mental health. This is a close second. This is a close second, but doing that was definitely, it was just exhausting.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you, because I run a group for Amazon, since, my business is primarily focused on helping sellers, get their products prepped. And then we have the Facebook group for this podcast. And then I run a small business one for the Business and Brew show. And it's like, there are times where it's so much work that I'm just like, man,
it can be like a full-time freaking job.
I kind of wish. I mean, I'm working. I have help with another guy that's an admin on our group. I have help from guys in the Amazon group to admin that page, but still, like, building an audience and creating a presence is so much work. It's like, man, I kind of wish I didn't have to.
Yeah, that sounds. I'm tired just listening to you.
Yeah,
I mean, I work 50, 60 hours a week. I don't want to come home and be like, eh. Like, that's what my wife does. My wife will sit on her phone at night, just like.
Well, that's part of what I do. So when I get to work in the morning, like, that is part of my schedule. So I think that's a big difference, is if that's part, like, people who do social media for companies, they get to work and, like, that's what they do.
Yeah.
It's just exhausting because I'm operations. So in addition to that, I have to do all the other shit as well.
Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah.
If I ever started a business, I'm sure I'd have to do social media, but fuck that noise.
So I'm super excited to have Alex on, because I had Kennedy, who I don't think you know him. It's possible you may have run across him in your career, but he is from my first training unit, because I went through Foxtrot 787 before I came down to 795. And so besides him, you're the person I've known the longest that I've had on this show, and your journey is definitely one I think that we can talk about.
Yeah. I mean, and we talked a little bit on the phone the other day, just the synopsis of events that unfolded from 2005, and I didn't get an opportunity to look for that picture. I'm probably gonna have to send it to you, of me and you back in our BDUs when you were skinny and I was skinny, and we didn't have any facial hair, but yeah, I think in talking about it, I mean, there's a lot of people that were successful from that platoon and that company overall, and the path that you take, I think, is kind of predicated on whether you're active guard or reserve and things of that nature. And which, Joe, me and Ryan were talking the other day about. Active duty is so inherently different than the reserves and guard, and how that kind of plays into your decisions in life. I've enlisted as an MP and went to college for criminal justice, graduated, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to go be a cop. That's what I want to do. And here I am flying jets all over the US, Canada, and Mexico, which is inherently different than anything I would have thought of. If you would have.
So when you say flying, I'm sorry to interrupt. When you say flying jets, are you flying like private jets, corporate jets, or like airlines? Like 747s?
Yeah, not that big. That's next level stuff. I mean, those guys get paid an exorbitant amount of money to do that kind of stuff, but I'm just a little peon right now. To kind of give you the series of events that unfold, obviously I graduated basic in AIT, then I went to college, did the whole reserve thing as an MP, garrison MP unit. Or no, the first one was corrections. Sort of cross-trained there, then moved to Texas and got into a garrison MP unit that disbanded from the reserves, which was kind of interesting. And so they're like, hey, you got to go find a home. And I was like, well, I don't want to move anywhere else. I don't understand, because I was just an E4 at the time. I'm like, all right, well, I'm in college. Because I went through ROTC. I was starting to get an ROTC, and I was like, oh, I'm going to go be an MP officer. And they're like, well, you got to find a unit in the reserves to drill with. So I said, well, what's the closest unit to Fort Hood that's in the reserves? And they're like, oh, what's this aviation unit that's on the airfield? They're like, oh, I'm going to go check them out. So they pulled me in. Obviously, I wasn't MOS queued for that. And they're like, hey, did you ever consider flying? And I was like, no, I want to go be, MP officer. Well, then they sat us down in ROTC one day and they're like, hey, if anybody's interested in flying helicopters for the Army, raise your hand. And I was the only one. I looked around and I was like, people are kind of, like, what do you mean you don't want to fly a helicopter? That's kind of fun. It sounds fun. Boy, I mean, I was right, but I was wrong. And so did all the tests and all that stuff, and was already in a unit in the reserves and got a guaranteed slot based on passing the test and physical and yada yada and all that stuff. And then graduated college in 2010, waited about 8 to 10 months before going to flight school. So that was fun. I just kind of shaved a mohawk and grew a beard and played Call of Duty and went to the gym, waiting to go to flight school. Graduated that 2012, came back to Fort Hood to the unit that originally, I was a cadet in, and then deployed 14-15. But prior to deployment, I don't know if you guys know, there's a program called AGR, Active Guard Reserve. So you can be in active status basically in the reserves. You got to have that skeleton structure behind all the people that come in 1 week in a month. And so it's full active duty benefits, just like being on active duty, but you're just assigned to a reserve component. So they picked me up. I applied for that. They picked me up. They actually placed me in a unit in Olathe, Kansas to fly Chinooks prior to the deployment. And so I went on the deployment with the understanding I would come back and go to the Chinook course, because obviously I was a Black Hawk guy. I guess I failed to mention that, but Ryan mentioned that in the previous show, because he was my first VIP transport. So came back. Well, let me back up a little bit. When I came back from flight school in 2012, I was like applying for this AGR thing, and they weren't picking me up. So I started grad school. Was still flying in the reserves. Got a little side job, make a little extra money just to barely get by. Then I got picked up AGR. Went on deployment, came, and in the middle of the deployment, they're like, hey, we can't get you a Chinook slot. And I was like, okay. They're like, well, we're going to send you either to Kentucky, to Fort Knox, or to Conroe, Texas. And I said, well, I love Texas. So I begged my branch manager. I said, hey, send me back to Texas. I want to go there, please. Like, if you can do anything, send me to Texas. So they put me in Conroe, which was a great that's probably, you know, the best thing that ever happened to me. And did another 3.5, I think it was about 3.5 years there, roughly, AGR. And when they were getting ready to PCS me to the captain's career course, I was like, you know, I don't really want to play this active duty. I don't want to move over and over and over again. You know, one of the beauties of being in the reserves as a reservist is to have a kind of stabilized life with a second job. So I refratted off active duty to go to the airlines. And at that point, they had a program for helicopter guys to go fly for the airlines where they would train you. And so that's what I ended up doing. And that's kind of where I am now. I stayed in that same unit as a reservist flying helicopters. I was company commander out there, air assault company. And so had a good time and met a lot of great people, really loved the unit. But it got to a point where, you know, my command time was over. There was no other position for me to go promote into 04. And I said, hey, I want to go fixed wing. And they're like, well, we don't know. Fixed wing, you know, that's, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, hey, I'm already like an airline guy. Like, this is kind of what I want to do. And I told my battalion commander, I said, he was very supportive of it. And I said, hey, look, if they don't give this to me, you know, I didn't flex or anything, but I was like, there's really no need for me to stay in the Army at this point. You know, I'm tired of flying all over and doing all, you know, like flying a helicopter is cool, but to a certain degree, it's not going to help me in my future career. So anyway, they gave me the C-12 course. And believe it or not, it's kind of so weird. I don't know if I talked about it with you, Ryan. This is kind of like my life now. So my unit is in Los Alamitos, California, just south of LA, probably about 20 minutes north of Long Beach. And I'm the S1 OIC there. But I fly the King Airs out of Navy Fort Worth, which is just west of Dallas. And oddly enough, my base for the airline is Dallas Fort Worth. So I fly the jet out of Dallas Fort Worth, King Air out of Navy Fort Worth, and I live in Conroe still, the Conroe area. So yeah, so I once a month, 2 weeks in the summer, hop on a jet, you know, for my flight benefits to go out to California. They pay for my hotel and my travel expenses up to I think it's like $500. And then, you know, when I'm done with that weekend, I fly back to usually the Dallas area and start another trip, or I just go home. And you know, like last night, I had to fly the King Air. We actually had a mission to fly this general. So it's just been like, if I'm not in Conroe, I'm in Dallas. If I'm not in Dallas, it's Fort Worth or California. So it's kind of like all over the place right now. So it's very interesting versus, you know, I look at maybe the active duty component side of the house and understanding how busy they are, but they're stabilized in one area pretty much, aside from going TDY. And it's just a whole different series of events. You know, if you would have told me I'd be flying a 4-star or 1-star general in an Army airplane when I'm 34, I would have been blown away and told you were a liar or drunk, you know.
How do you get to and from Dallas?
So it's one of two ways. Usually, like if I'm just doing airline stuff, I'll drive to George Bush, park there, get on an airplane, you know, obviously schedule a flight and go fly up to Dallas. And then I'll start my flights there for the airlines. This time I ended up driving up to Dallas. Actually,
how far is that?
It's about 3.5 hour drive.
Okay.
But yeah, it's quite a distance, and it sucks when you drive a truck that has like 13 miles per gallon. But
so I've driven through Texas when that's not a fun drive to do.
No. You know what's interesting is I get an opportunity. Here's my shameless plug to listen to podcasts on the drive along that way up 45 north. But just to give you an example, I got done with a trip on Thursday. Today's Saturday, so I got done with the trip on Thursday. And it was weird. I woke up in Springfield, Missouri, flew an airplane, 6:30 departure down to Dallas. Then Dallas, I hopped on an airplane at 10:30 to fly to Houston, got in my truck in Houston, drove to Conroe to get my Class 1 flight physical for the FAA, drove back to my house with my pre-packed bag with my uniform, picked it up, drove to Fort Worth, because my girlfriend has a house up here, and then subsequently woke up yesterday and went in to go fly the King Air, and it ended up being a super late mission based on weather. So got back. So it's just like I'm all over the place. You know, I don't really have a whole lot of time to do much of anything. I'm glad we programmed this in here and was able to make this happen because I think it's important, so I blocked out all 3-4 hours just to be able to do this. So,
Crazy, man.
I am exhausted just listening to that.
Yeah.
Like
I actually thought Conroe was further than that from Dallas, just because that's where I had my the engine to my Cobra rebuilt, the top end at Nickens Brothers Racing down there in Conroe.
Oh,
and
really?
I feel like from Fort Hood, where I was, it was at least a 3-hour drive.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Because we drive, which is even crazier. In order to get my Army flight physical, I have to drive to Fort Hood. Harley, dog's whining. She can probably see your dogs. I have to drive to Fort Hood to get my Army flight physical, and that sucks because I got to wake up at like 3:00 in the morning just to be there at 6. And that's a full day just to get this flight physical and then drive back. Now, luckily, they obviously pay me for that. The times that I'm on duty, they do pay me for that. So it's a careful balance. It really is. There's never like this month's just crazy, but my schedule is always packed. So, but I can tell you that flying in the Army, flying the airplanes is a lot easier. It's almost like fake Army. We call it Air Force Light. You're kind of treated really well, and it's crazy. I mean, you show up and the airplane's already parked outside, and when you go pre-flight it, you have a guy. You don't really do much of anything. You have maintainers there. It's all very catered to, very nice. Versus the helicopter, like you were explaining, where you have to open up panels and look at things, and a lot of planning involved in that. So it's a good time. It's a good little side gig, to be honest. So, and they're not just doing stateside stuff too. I mean, I can't say much of what we do, but they were flying to, like, for their annual training. Everybody says, oh, 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer. Well, yeah, this previous year they were trying to plan to go to Guam is where they wanted to go. The year before that, they went to Thailand. They flew overseas to Thailand. So their training exercises are not they're not boring. I can tell you that. So, and they're fairly active, down in across the world. Like, they ferry jets over to Japan and stuff like that. I mean, it's pretty unique.
So do you fly the big transport planes?
For the airlines, I fly, it's an Embraer 175. It's a 76 passenger 2-class jet. So we do have first class. So when you walk in the airplane, it's technically a regional jet. So it's what you would consider a smaller jet. But when you walk in, you can actually stand up completely, and when you walk through first class, you have 2 on the left, 1 on the right, and then it's 2 straight down the back for the economy class. So I fly that. And then the King Air I fly, which is pretty standard. It's a King Air 200 for the Army. They call it the C-12. So then the reserves also have the UC-35, which is a Citation Ultra, if I'm not mistaken, or Citation 500. So that's a jet. That's like a private jet that's gray, to transport people. Usually, 07s and above typically is what they fly. So, but that's a whole different course. In order to go to that one, you have to meet certain criteria and flight hours and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, for the airlines, the jet I fly is really, really nice. I really, really enjoy it. It's really easy, exceptionally easy. So
basically how you got here is you're like, I want to be a cop, but I don't want to move around a lot. Who wants to fly helicopters? And you're like, fuck yeah.
Yep.
It's amazing they give you guys that option.
Yeah, I mean, the reserves, it's not really. I mean, you can pick what you want to do, but at the same time, you got to meet certain criteria, and it's not hard. I mean, I guess the biggest takeaway that I think in life is I'll give you a quick story that relates to this. So I show up to the HHC unit as a cadet, not knowing what I'm doing with my hands. And I was talking to this 04, and I'll never forget. And I was like, yeah, I want to go fly. He's like, okay, that's cool. And I was like, hey, I want to go be AGR. And, because I wanted the active duty benefits, but I wanted to be in the reserves. And he's like, oh yeah, you'll never get AGR. You'll it's a very competitive program. I would focus on your civilian career path and all sort of stuff. And I was kind of deflated. And, you know, here I am having a field grade officer telling me that my dreams are, you know, not valid. And I just said, you know, I'm not going to talk to that guy anymore. He doesn't seem like he's very supportive of anything. And so obviously I picked up AGR, and in the deployment and mobilization North Fort Hood, I saw him again when I was a senior first lieutenant. And he's like, hey, Alex, how are you? And I was like, hey, sir, how's it going? He's an 05 at this point. He's like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm AGR out there now in Olathe. And he's like, really? And I said, yeah. And so you can see him kind of be like, huh. He probably doesn't remember that conversation when he told me it would never happen. But I find that if you keep people in your life that can tell you yes, or give you the opportunities or support you, those are the type of people that will help you succeed. And I don't like when people tell me no. You know, maybe you can say that's me being an O grade or a man or whatever, but you know, even when I was in meetings and I had to tell people no, I wouldn't say no. I'd say, hey, this is what we can do, you know. And if you ask the right questions, or you just aren't shy to ask these questions on how to get to where you want to be, you know, you'll eventually get there. And that's the thing that anybody can relate to that in life. If you think about it, it's all about, because a lot of people buckle down and they're like, oh, I don't want to ask, or I'm too shy, or, you know, maybe now is not the right time, or creating all these excuses as to why they can't find the information they need in order to move forward. And that's really what I did. I was just like, hey, how do I do this? And when somebody told me no, I was like, all right, well, you're of no help to me. I'm just going to go find somebody to tell me I can. Because everybody thinks, oh, you got to have perfect vision to be a pilot. I grew up that way, you know, as a young child, you know, oh, you got to have perfect vision. And I didn't have perfect vision. I had 20/25, which is slightly off. And then eventually somebody was like, no, you can have correctable with lenses. And I'm like, okay. And it was I think it was a doctor that told me that. So now the question is, if I ask somebody something, I wonder what their background is, right? You know, you tend to think, like, if I ask a mechanic on what problem I have with my car, it's going to have more validity than somebody else, like an accountant. Does that make sense? That's kind of how I look at things. You look at where the information is coming from. That's how I base my judgments and decisions. But really, you know, find that support network of people to be able to do what you want to do is, I think, the greatest. That's why I'm where I'm at now. You know, I started asking some questions like, hey, how do I get to the airlines? Oh, well, we have this program now. You know, oh, okay, well, let me look into that, see if that works. So, but yeah, I was cop, which didn't work out. You know, obviously it's, you know, not a bad job per se. I think now it's a more challenging time to be a police officer. I have friends that are police officers, but cop, and then helicopters, and now jets is really so.
Yeah, I agree with what you said about like not taking no for an answer. Because like when I got to Fort Polk, there were 2 different deployments that came up that I volunteered to go on. And also with what you talked about, like where the information is coming from, because I felt like I was speaking to a squad leader or an NCO and saying, hey, I want to do this. It's something, you know, I don't have a wife and kids. I don't have a family. Let me go in place of someone who may not want to go right now. And I kind of feel like either they weren't passing that up the chain of command, and they were telling me, oh, you know, we tried, but you can't go, or they were passing it up and someone else was making the decision like, oh no, you're going to stay right here, whether that be for numbers or whatever it was. And then of course, eventually I got my chance to go, but I also feel like part of that is because I kept speaking up. So when the time rolled around to kind of move people in between units, instead of passing me off to one of the other garrison units and keeping me there, I stayed with my unit and I was able to do the training and then finally deploy to Iraq. So yeah, not taking no for an answer and just keep going after what you want.
That's very different than the Marine Corps. Yeah, that you can't do that in the Marine Corps.
I'm a firm. I mean, I agree with Alex. I think, you know.
So I tried to go when I came home from Iraq. There was a unit. So we were going on a MU on our next deployment, And so, but there was a unit in Afghanistan that needed bodies. And so they sent out to all the line units, hey, we need mortarmen for whatever reason. Anybody who wants to try and go to Afghanistan, come sign up in first sergeant's office. And I wasn't a mortarman, so I was like, can I go? Can I try? And they were like, no, you're not a mortarman. You haven't been on 2 deployments and you're not a corporal yet. So no, you're stuck. I was like, well, I'll go talk to first sergeant. First sergeant walked up. First sergeant was like, what'd your staff sergeant say? And he said, no, I couldn't do this. And he goes, well, I guess you can't fucking do it then.
Well, I had the same thing happen when we got back from deployment and I wanted to go to Germany. First, I was told that I wouldn't be able to PCS at all. Then because what happened is they had us fenced in, and what should have happened, because they needed the garrison MP unit, is they should have lifted the fence and reapplied a new one. But instead of doing that, they left the existing fence on. So when I called branch and talked to them, they thought we were still in Iraq. And I was like, there is nobody on earth that thinks a line MP unit has been in Iraq for 24 months in a row. It's just not possible. And so I went to battalion. I jumped through the hoops to fix the issue. And I'm not sure if that fixed it for the whole unit or just for me, but then I got offered to PCS and I said, well, I want to go to Germany. And they said, well, we don't have Germany. And my entire chain of command was like, you're not going to get to go to Germany. There's no way, you can't do it. And finally, one day they were just like, we have Germany and we have Korea. And I was advised to go to Korea. I chose to go to Germany because that's where I wanted to go. And then after that is when I ended up going to Fort Hood. But same thing. I just didn't take no for an answer, and I got what I wanted. Best 2 years of my life.
Yeah, I think, from thinking about my command time, I had guys, again, it was, reserve style, whatever, but the ebbs and flows of staffing, which is just like anything with any company, right? You're going to have staffing issues. But from my personal experience of people telling me like, no, you can't do this, or no, pigeonholing you into a position to where they need to keep staffing levels at a certain thing, I think you end up prohibiting people from doing stuff that they want to do in their career. Like you wanted to go to Germany, and maybe the answer was no on active duty, but in the reserves, if somebody wanted to go to Kentucky to move units, to move their entire family to be close, in this case, the guy wanted to be closer to family. And I was like, yeah, go. And he was a critical MOS. We really needed him. And so for me, I was like, no, I just don't want to do that. Like, why would I keep somebody in a position that they don't want to be in? Do I think I'm going to get productivity out of them? I call it, I had a commander a long time ago said, make deposits into their emotional bank account. You make a lot of deposits into somebody's bank account, and the one day you need to make a withdrawal, it's easier to say that. Like, hey, Steve, remember that one time I let you go because your kid fell off a bike and you had to run out the door and go to the hospital? Yeah. Remember the one time, we didn't charge you a day of leave because you needed to stay home, your wife needed to work, and I didn't charge you for that? Yeah. Well, now I need you to come in on Saturday at 6 p.m. in order to do an inventory. And they're a little bit more like, oh, okay. So you don't bring the hammer down on soldiers and aviators and things like that. You gotta work with people. Everybody's got their own thing. Wives get pregnant, people die, cars break down. You can't just be this hard-nosed, staffing issue. I always said that my 3 priorities are always still, even as an officer, is food, family, and pay. And I instilled that into my lieutenants and obviously my first sergeant at the time. I said, those 3 things are the most important. I said, inventories can get hashed out. Property can be found or, done a flip on. But if you take care of those 3 things, you will have people that are more likely to work for you again, and that was really important to me. It is to this day, because, if you think about it, they're all kind of related to each other. Everybody's got to put food on their table and eat. Everybody's got to pay for something. Their finances may be jacked up, but, it's for you to advise them and sit down and talk with them on. But, I think we get lost sometimes in, the mission set of, well, we need this person right now. And we forget that they have existential issues that don't allow them to be productive in the back of an aircraft, front of an aircraft, or on the ground. And that's where I think true leadership comes in and assesses all that kind of stuff. and takes a look at it and says, okay, well, Steve may not be the best person for the job now. And there's units out there that do it well, you know. The reserves is inherently different than active duty. I don't know how they do it on active duty. I mean, I think it's more centralized, but you know, there's different challenges in the different components, and you know, you can see it across the board. So
Yeah.
where active duty may do some things well, they fall short where the reserves can pick it up, and vice versa. So it's an interesting perspective. After almost 16 and a half years, I look at it and I'm like, I'm kind of glad I took the route I did. You know, I might have missed some opportunities and some accolades that I probably would have got on active duty, but I live a pretty good life. You know, I can't complain about that. And I made a lot of bad decisions in my life, but I made a lot more gooder decisions, as the Army term would be. and that's kind of why I'm where I'm at now. And a lot of it was due in part to the people that helped me along, you know. And it's, you know, you can stem it. I mean, I've known you now over 16 years. I mean, you think about that. How many people do you know that you still keep in contact with that you've known for over a decade? Very few. You know, no matter where you are in the US, I can still pick up the phone and text you at 11 o'clock at night and be like, hey man, what's going on? You know?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of that is, you know, some of the brotherhood within the military and sisterhood, if you want to say that too. But there is that kind of unique bond. So it's just funny, you know, like when I called, was I in Raleigh when I saw you last, when I was on the overnight? So I was like, oh yeah, let me call Ryan up, see what he's up to. So that was a good time.
Yeah. And one thing I learned when I was at Fort Hood, I had a buddy I met at Fort Polk, and we were friends for at that time, probably 5 to 7 years. And he was like, hey, my sister's moving down to Dallas. I'll be in Dallas this week. And for a split second, I was like, I can't go. I got to work. There's no way I can make this happen. And then I was like, you know what? This dude is coming from Michigan. He's out of the Army. And he's going to be 3 hours from where I am. I can take time out and drive 3 hours to go see him. And I did. So it's like, I've made it a point since then that if someone is in my area, whatever I can do to drop what I'm doing. And now, thankfully, with the work schedule I have, I can, like, just yesterday, there was a guy I do not know and I have never met. And he posted in the Irreverent Warriors group that he was coming to Raleigh and he wanted to have coffee with anybody that was down. And I was like, I'm down. And I went up there and I met him and we had coffee together and we had a great conversation. So it's like, if you're in Raleigh, it's like, it doesn't matter to me what I've got going on, just being able to drop what I'm doing to make time for people that, you know, you care about. I think that's super important.
Yeah. I think those, you know, you can relate it to like friends and previous coworkers, if you will, but it's important to make time for family as well. You know, my family my friends are my family, really. You know, I do have a very small family that I come from. But you know, those relationships are important to not turn a blind eye to how much you work and actually allocate some time, you know, take a knee and say, all right, well, this weekend I'm not going to work. I'm going to choose not to fly, or, you know, something like that in order to keep that's good for your mental health. You know, yeah. I mean, there was in November of 2020, I worked 28 days flying between the helicopter and the jet. And I got done with that month and I was just smoked. I mean, I was like, man, you know, I'm trying to work towards this goal, but, and the other 2 days of that 30 days, they got one of the facilities shut down due to some COVID stuff, you know? And, you know, I just realized, hey, you can't be working as much as you are. You can go on the grind, but it just takes a toll on your mental health, you know? And so that's important, a keynote to say, yeah, you know, maybe I'll take the next 4 hours and not do anything, or sit down and, you know, watch a movie or something less productive. So, but
yeah, so we went through basic training together. I'm going to tell the story of how you and I reconnected. We went through basic training, Fort Polk. Obviously, he went one path, I went another. And then, you know, you're always connected with the people you're around. And back then, I mean, Facebook had just started, so it wasn't like a real thing. I mean, MySpace was still out, and then I went on deployment. I saw some people I went through training with downrange, and got back, went to Germany, went to Fort Hood, and at Fort Hood is when one of the lieutenants was like, "Hey, we're running a marathon. You should run it." And I was like, "You are crazy." And I have sucked at running my whole life. So I started running, and I started running a lot. And one day I'm out for a run on my own. And it was 7 miles from, I want to say, from the barracks out to the airfield and back. And so I go on that run, and coming back from the gate, there was this car pulled over, and this guy just mean mugging me. And I'm like, what the hell is this guy's problem? So I run around the car, and I thought it was some dickhead officer, like just, about to call my chain of command. Like, this guy's not got his PT belt on or something like that. So I get done running. I use my phone to track it, and I grab my phone to stop the GPS, and I got a Facebook message, and it's from this guy. And he says, "Hey, are you on Fort Hood?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why?" He's like, "You just ran past my car." I was like, "What the fuck?"
So he was the one mean mugging you?
Yeah, he was on the phone. So he was pulled over, because you can't drive and talk on the phone at the same time. So he was pulled over on the phone, but he's staring at me because he knew who I was. He was like, "Hey, I got a house in Harker Heights. You should come by and have a beer sometime." I was like, "Holy shit."
Nice.
I totally forgot that. What year was that?
I was like, what is wrong with this fuckhead looking at me? And I get back, and you're like, "Hey, you just ran past my car." I was like, "Oh, okay, that's what's wrong with him." I actually know that guy. And then you said about me being your first VIP. That's a good story, because I don't know if you knew this or not, but I was scheduled to work the road on mid shift both of those nights. So when you texted me, "Do you want to go up?" I was getting off shift. And so I went back, and I put my stuff down, did what I had to do. I think I get a pizza. I think I brought a pizza.
I think you did. I listened to the podcast, and it brought back all those memories. I didn't know that you had that crazy of a work schedule and was that tired.
Yeah. So it was only an 8-hour shift, but when you factor PT in there, it's closer to 12. So I'm getting off shift. I go up to the airfield with some pizza. He does the flight plan and everything. We go out. I also find out that essentially the purpose of the flight was to refuel. It was hours and refuel. So they fill up the bird. We fly up to College Station. They refill it, and we go out to eat. And then we fly back, and then we did some combat maneuvers in the box, and then land. And then as soon as I got done, I got back. I think I told the guys I wouldn't be at PT that night. So as soon as I got back, I went back to my room, grabbed my gear, and went to the PMO to go straight back to shift. I was awake for 36 hours straight.
That sucks.
Totally worth it.
That fucking
totally worth it.
But you guys just like straight up rolled up, like you rolled up to the airfield with him, and you just hopped in.
Well, he was already there, so he was doing his flight plan and all the administrative end before we take off.
Okay.
And of course, you had to have the crew getting the bird around, doing all their checks and everything. So I got up there, and then we went on the flight, because like I said, he had to maintain hours. It was a refuel.
Right. So you had to go up no matter what and fly that night.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what it was. I mean, I've done so many flights, but yeah, I mean, we were going to fly regardless. It's just, we can't have, we can only have like military and congressional level people in the back of the aircraft. You can't just like take your brother up. But that's why.
It'd be awesome if you could, though. I've been taking chicks up all the time.
Yeah. And there's kind of a story behind that. Some guys took their wives up. They like snuck them in years and years and years ago in the back of an aircraft, and they actually crashed the aircraft and killed both their wives.
Oh.
So there's inherent danger obviously in doing it, but in terms of making, it's a unique experience to be able to fly Ryan, of all people, that we went through basic training together and had all that kind of stuff. It just was a really cool thing to do. And I've had a couple of those experiences, but not many. So it was kind of neat. It was, I was going to fly anyway. I needed to build hours. You need to fly a certain amount of hours per year. And, that was one of the things I had to go fly anyway. So, and he happened to have the somewhat availability to come. So it was cool. It was definitely cool.
Yeah, I didn't get a lot of experience in I think I've been on a helicopter 3 or 4 times, in the Marines. Like that was it. We did not have a lot of opportunity to be on once helos. That was your one time?
That was my one time, because we used Blackhawks to transport the detainees in Iraq when I got there, and they shut that down quick. Obviously, when I went with you, Alex, I found out it was probably due to the cost, because it's like refueling that bird and flying it. And I think they had to do 2 birds 2 times to get everybody out to IHT. They flipped it and they turned it into a Rhino bus for us to transport. But even when we were doing that, I was security for the LZ. So my team helped set up the 360. So that was, I want to say that lasted maybe about a month, and then they flipped over to the Rhino bus. So even the guys getting to go on the bird to help escort the detainees out there, eventually that came to an end.
I think I had one in training, and that was an Osprey. That wasn't even, I don't know what you would consider that thing.
Powered lift is what they technically call that.
Is that what they call that? So I was on, that was once. That was one time. That was training. Then flying out of Iraq, they put us on a helo to go from our Cobb back to El Asad. And then going into Afghanistan. So flying from Leatherneck down to Cobb Sharp. So 3 times.
And a lot of that I feel like had to do with the availability of like an airfield. If they didn't have a place to land a plane.
No, they straight up, like they would land in the middle. Like I've seen helos come down the middle of nowhere, which is pretty fucking cool. Not for why they had to come down, but I've seen them land. So when Sergeant Harris was wounded, they landed like right next to us in a cornfield. They were like, "Fuck it, we're going down."
When we
we're landing.
When we did Op 4 for a group out in the box at Fort Polk, it was Special Forces. They had us pull a 360 and landed one out there, and we set up an LZ and everything. And
I had to do that a few times. Never, but I wasn't on the bird for those. They were like, "Hey, we got VIPs coming in. We got to go outside and secure an LZ." And it's like, like that shit sucked.
Yeah, that was the one time. And then
that was always the grumbles, like, "Oh crap, really? Come on, can't they just land? We can see them. They're fine."
Yeah, when we got back and did the combat maneuvers in the box, I'll never forget, because he was talking to me on the headset, and he was like, "Hey, we're about to do this." And at one point, he banked it so hard.
I didn't get to wear the headset anytime. No, we didn't have headsets.
I was the only person in the helicopter that didn't have a purpose.
Oh, everybody else.
My purpose. He was like, "Here's my phone."
And you just eating pizza in the back, like, "It's fucking cool, man."
But I was strapped in, and he banked it so hard at one point, looking straight ahead, I was facing the ground. That was insane to me. I was like, "Holy shit."
See, I feel like helo pilot. So one of the times that when we were flying from Leatherneck to Cobb Sharp, that nobody had headsets on. It was just it was like a squad worth of Marines. We had all of our gear in the center, and this had the ramp in the back, and there was a 50 cal gunner sitting out the back of that thing, and then there were 2 side gunners. And this is the middle of the night. I don't know what was going on, but we'd been flying. You can't hear anything because all you hear is just the rotary blades going. And then all of a sudden, all 3 doors just started shooting for whatever reason, just out. Like, I don't know if they were test fire. I don't know what they were doing, but like, we're all looking at each other with our NVGs on, like wide eyed, like the fuck is happening? And they didn't tell us shit. Like they didn't say like, "Oh, we're like," they just, and then the helicopter started moving all weird, and then we landed.
No,
I was like, the fuck just how, like, are we where we're supposed to be? What's going on? It was fuck crazy.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, it was him, the pilot in command, me, the crew chief. I think that was about it.
Yep, it was just the 4 of us. Yep.
Yeah.
So
and
we
then
put you
landed
in
in College Station, went to eat, had a good
yeah, we
steak
put you in the crew chief station. I think it was aft left. And that's why that seat's wired for a headset, obviously, because a crew member usually sits there. But typically in the back, we don't have headsets for anybody that rides back there unless it's a VIP thing, where we have, it wired for that specific reason. So it's kind of unique experience. So, but, it just depends on the configuration of the aircraft. But yeah, I mean, aircraft like that, I believe you were probably in CH-46, Joe, probably somewhere around, maybe a Chinook. I'm not exactly sure.
It wasn't a Chinook. It looked like a big old, like a bigger version of like a Seahawk. I don't know what that is. Yeah, it was huge.
Sea Stallion. Yeah, it was
Sea Stallion. That's it.
Yep, that's it. Those are awesome aircraft. But every time you go up and you fly, I mean, you got to be considerate of the people in the back. Like, are they going to throw up and all sort of shit? So we don't, like, I knew Ryan was not going to throw up. I mean, I probably tried to make him, but
it was insane. Because I'll tell you what, like in Germany, their regulations are different for roller coasters. So I've been on roller coasters that like you go up in the sky higher than you can here in the US, and then they drop you straight down. And being on that bird, I think, was one of the most intense rides I've ever had. I was like, it was crazy, man. Especially, I mean, obviously when he was doing the combat maneuvers to and from Fort Hood to College Station was just like a regular. It was a little weird because I was moving sideways because of the seat I was in, but it got me gripping my seat a little. There was a little bit of a pucker factor, but I definitely wasn't throwing up.
I just remember there was a fourth time we did a helo insert on a 2-week-long op. And that was intense because I remember sitting. So the helos landed outside of our patrol base. We all get on. There's another platoon securing the LZ. We sat there for like, I don't know. It felt like forever. It's like middle of the night and we're just sitting there. And I'm like, I feel like we're sitting ducks here, guys. Like if anybody wants to come out, and then they took off. We went way far south, like way south, and we landed. And we get out like everybody. So the two helos land. The whole platoon is between these two helos. They both land and then take off. And then it's like, this is where we're going to live for the next 2 weeks. And we are in Indian country at that point. Like we immediately were like, oh shit, there's no one down here to help us. We are 30 guys in the middle of Taliban held territory.
Ready, set, go.
That was nothing happened. That was the other crazy thing is nothing happened. Like the Taliban was like, they knew the helos land. They were like, I don't know what to fucking do with these guys way down here. I think they came out and shot at us maybe twice. That was it.
That's crazy.
But there was no crazy. That one was just they didn't do any crazy like maneuvers or anything. They literally just took off. We were in the air for like 20 minutes and then we landed.
Yeah.
And we all got off and they disappeared.
That's crazy. I remember too, Alex, you told me about how much it costs to fill that bird. And if I remember correctly, you said something around 10 grand.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact operational cost between maintenance and fuel and what you pay the pilots and stuff like that. I could be wrong. It's probably around $5,000 an hour, somewhere around there. That's the math that I heard. I've never actually sat down and calculated it. It was funny. One day I was at Fort Hood, or no, it was at Conroe, and they came to my office and they said, "Hey, we need you." I was PIC at the time. Like, "Hey, we need you to fly to Fort Hood. You got to pick up this." It was like an aircraft wash drum, if you will, like this big plastic container that has, fluid in it to be able to wash aircraft. And I was like, okay. I said, when do you need it done? They gave me like a couple hours to go pick it up or whatever. So we got the aircraft ready. We launched. We landed there. We got fuel. They strapped it in the back. They moved the seats out of the way. Where it was big. I mean, it was huge. It was pretty good size. If it fit in there, it usually shipped. And so flew it back. They're like, oh yeah, thanks. Blah blah blah. And I go home. And I was talking to my neighbor and I said, hey, what's going on? He said, what'd you do today? I said, I flew to Fort Hood to go pick up this thing. And he's in like logistics, right? And he goes, wait, so you flew an aircraft to Fort Hood and it took you like maybe an hour and a half one way. So basically 3 hours of flight time to pick up a container of fluid. And how long did it take you from start to finish? And he's asking me like all these like, intricate questions. And I said, I don't know, like it must have been 7 hours or something like that.
Yeah.
He goes, and how much did that cost? And I said, I don't know, maybe $15,000 or whatever. He goes, I could have paid a trucker the same, like a fraction of that cost to go pick that up. I said, but Dustin, you're not seeing the training value in that. That's, it's immeasurable right there. I took a guy out there who had never been to Fort Hood, who had never, done this. I said, how can you put a price on that? And he just started laughing. Sometimes we do stuff that costs a ton of money for, it's like, it's crazy. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, we talk about, the time that, oh, hang on.
Lost video.
You got me back? All right. Somebody tried to call me. Sorry about that. Just the cost of the parts on the aircraft. I used to tell people, like, they come in and they look at they finally see it's a big freaking helicopter. Each blade is roughly $125,000 for a blade. And there's 4. The GPS, I think, is like $78,000 or $70,000. Hydraulic pumps, we got 3 on them, and they're probably upwards of $50,000-$60,000 a piece. I mean, these are parts that not commonly break, but they have to be replaced at a certain time frame. And so the maintenance cost on it's just exorbitant. I mean, it's crazy. And so that's why I think when they allocate, the military gets really finicky about when they fly the aircraft and who's flying. There's lots of control and visibility. That's why you're talking about the detainee stuff. I'm like, it just sounds to me that they didn't want to do that mission anymore. I mean, they were like, okay, we're done. Put these people on a bus and we'll reallocate these aircraft to do something else. It very rarely does it come down to cost, but it comes down to like, what's the mission? Do we really want to do it? And, and then also what aircraft are available to do it. They might have all their aircraft broken or down for maintenance or something like that, which would be really bad, but that does happen. And so, I mean, I was breaking aircraft. I remember in like July of 2020 in my company, I was borrowing aircraft from other company. I'd go talk to the other commander. I'd be like, Chris, I need 2 of your aircraft. And he'd be like, all right, take these tail numbers. And then I just assign crews to go fly on those while my maintainers were working on the aircraft I had. At one time, I think I had 10 helicopters and like 8 were down for various reasons. Wow. And so you're not like successful in your mission capability at that point, but you make it happen.
That could have been, it also could have been something where maybe the bus was used before we got there and maybe it was down or they were replacing it. And so the Blackhawks doing the transports could have been a temporary thing. Right.
I hate to say this, but it's like risk, right? Like, why are we risking these crews to go out and transport detainees when we can put them on a bus? That's on the ground. I mean, I'm sure there's risk there too, but not as much as this shit getting shot down. I don't know.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because I mean, we had route clearance in Iraq, and we were going from VBC Victory Base Complex over to the Green Zone. So I mean, you're talking maybe 30 minutes outside the wire, give or take. And those are main routes that we would take to get over there. So they were constantly being patrolled. So the risk of having something in the air, I could see, would definitely be a lot higher than a bus driving routes that are constantly being monitored and cleared.
Well, I think it's also because when we were in Iraq, anytime we got a detainee that we had to send off to, I don't know what jail or whatever.
The TIFF.
Yeah. They got loaded up onto a Humvee or an MRAP and we convoyed them over there under guard. And then whatever happened to them after that was there. But it was in Afghanistan completely different. When we got detainees in Afghanistan, no, we had to call in
air support,
the helo to come in and pick that guy up. And that guy had to get escorted by one of our guys. And that was a logistical nightmare because we had to give up one of our guys as an armed guard all the way back to either like Dwyer or Leatherneck, to like drop them off of the MPs. And then that guy had to wait essentially on the flight line for a ride back down to where we were. There was no like, oh, we'll just give you a convoy. Like everything we did Like all of our resupplies were done by Hilo. It was very rare to see a convoy in Afghanistan roll down to us. I mean, it was rare.
Yeah.
Just because where we were, the limited access that was there. I mean, there was no paved roads where we were. Everything was gravel.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. Accessibility.
Yeah, and we could not travel on any of those roads. We never patrolled. So I was in a vehicle 4 times in Iraq, like on the ground in an MRAP or whatever they're called, new replacement MRAPs.
Yeah.
And of those 3 times, one of the vehicles was blown up. Jeez. I mean, we could not go anywhere on a road.
Yeah.
Like it was just, they threw IEDs down on roads and bridges like it was candy.
Yeah.
I think we found and destroyed like something like 700 something IEDs in our tour.
That's insane, man.
I mean, that's how, like, that's just how littered everywhere was. Like, we walked through farm fields. We didn't walk on paths. I mean, so everything we had was helos. Like, you had to get, I've got pictures of like helos like kicking pallets of water out the side to do resupply for us. Like an old ass Huey like landed with its door open. The door cutter's just pushing fucking MREs and
Here's
water
your
out.
Stuff.
Here's your
Bye.
stuff, and then it just takes off, and we're all running out the field to grab it.
Yeah,
I mean, there was just no. So that was kind of the difference, though. So coming from a logistical standpoint, back to the conversation was there was no way that to get stuff down to us other than helos, but in Iraq it was completely opposite.
Yeah.
I mean, Iraq it was, we can drive everywhere.
Yeah. Well, we did. We had to take radios one time. It was so funny, man. You see that meme about how so much of the army is hurry up and wait, and we had to take
military.
Yeah, we had to take radios on a 5-ton up to I forget where we took it, but it was like a 3-hour drive, and we convoyed up there, and we had a 5-ton just loaded up with these radios. And we get up there and we're at the connexes, and the unit we were meeting comes out, and we start unloading them into the connex because we're just there to help load and unload things. And halfway through it, they're like, hold on. And they're looking at serial numbers and they're checking all of this inventory. And halfway through it, they're like, no, put them back on the truck. They're the wrong ones. The whole convoy, like halfway unloaded and everything, load them back up, go back down, and basically the entire mission at that point was just canceled. I don't know where the stuff was that they were expecting or why we took the wrong stuff up there, but it was hilarious. An entire mission, a whole day, and just nope, shut that shit down.
I mean, Iraq was so, like, I remember paved roads everywhere. Like there was like all the cities were connected by roads. It was very rare to go off road. Like I was like, why do we have Humvees? I don't get it. Why do we need these 4-wheeled vehicles out here? We're rolling down an MSR that's asphalt, We get to Afghanistan. It was like, oh shit, they don't know what a paved road is.
We hit dirt roads in Iraq. We went to Butler Range to basically just test fire all our shit to make sure it worked. And when we got out there were so many dirt roads, and we were driving. It was funny. Saw a kid that looked like he was 11 years old, and we're convoying down there, and it's like a platoon size element. So I don't know, you're talking about probably about 12 trucks, give or take. And he was standing on the side of the road just flipping us off. Just mean mugging and flipping us off. I was like, all right, calm down, kid. But dirt roads for miles. And that was the only time in Iraq that I saw that. Otherwise, you're right.
It was always, I think I saw a dirt road from when we left the Shark's Fin. And that was for maybe 200 yards. And that was where everybody was like, oh shit, we got to really check for IEDs. Because we're on this dirt road. But like Afghanistan, it was a 180. 180. You didn't I never saw a paved road there. Not one.
I'm not jealous of you even a little bit.
The poppy fields were beautiful when they came in bloom.
I talked to so many people, Alex, that went to Afghanistan, MPs, and the MP motto is death before dismount. Yep. And they were like, I was like, oh yeah, Afghanistan must have been all right. My buddy is like, no, man, we walked everywhere. I was like, fuck.
I put
that.
800 miles on my feet in 7 months.
Nope.
That's how much walking I did. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
That's how much walking I did. I mean,
you guys walk, I gotta go fly.
And we walked through, like, I've got video of like what it was like we would walk through fields, and they were so muddy after rain, because we were there during the raining season.
Yeah.
So like we'd walk through these muddy fields, and like your foot would come down, like you'd go about halfway down the shin, and your foot would just sink into the mud. So you would like high knee out, like you'd walk through like a 20-yard field, and it felt like you just ran 10 fucking miles.
Oh Lord.
It was exhausting. Like you'd go through a field, you get to the other side where the tree line was, you'd get in that ditch, and you'd sit there for 20 minutes to rest, because you're like, I'm exhausted and I've got to go through another field like that. Like you're constantly like having to like dig your boot out of the ground, put your boot back on. It was fucking miserable.
Good Lord.
I got in trouble one time because I landed in a muddy field, and then when I took off and landed back on the ramp, I then taxied in with the wheels, and it left a big mud streak on the pavement. That's my experience with mud. You know, like,
big skid mark there. Who
Yeah,
has the
big
skid
skid
mark
mark.
out there?
You guys are
Made it
slinging mud
dirty.
all over the ramp. I'm like, oh, sorry about that. You know, but
He made it dirty.
Dirty.
I remember going back to what you were talking about cost, Alex. You before you took me up, you gave me like a tour. I went up there and you were like, let me show you the bird. And we're going all over it. And you're like, climb up here, look at this, look at that, whatever. And we get to what, not being a pilot, I would call the passenger side, but the basically the right side of the bird. And you point inside and you say, see that right there? I was like, yeah. And you're like, you know what that is? I was like, no. He's like, that is a $10,000 piece of equipment. I was like, that is very expensive. That makes sense. It's a helicopter. There's probably a lot of expensive shit in there. He's like, guess what it is? I was like, I don't know. It's got numbers on it, maybe like elevation or something. He said, that's a clock.
It was a $10,000 clock. Wow.
I was like, what the fuck?
Well,
I think I was being facetious about the cost, but I'm sure it did. But it was a digital clock in your defense. I mean, it didn't have like hands and sweeps and all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a digital clock. I'll never forget that. You were sitting there. I was like, yeah, you know what that is? And you're like, eyes all big and stuff. It's a clock. You know, they allocated some space for that. You know, that's
what's your favorite thing to what's your favorite thing? Do you prefer fixed wing or do you prefer helos?
You know,
like fun wise, what's more fun to fly?
Oh, the helicopter. And you know, the helicopter.
Hands down, he didn't have to think about it. He's like,
yeah. No, it's a roller coaster ride that you control. You know, it's got its parameters that you want to stay in, that like you don't want to die. But no, yeah, it's extremely maneuverable. I mean, just the shit you can do in it, it's just unbelievable. I mean, like you said, you can land anywhere. And you know, if I got a problem with the aircraft, I got a hydraulic problem, whatever it is, I'm like, I'm going in that field right there. With an airplane, you kind of can't do that. You know, depending on the size of the airplane too. It's a bigger jet. You know, you're not going to put it down in a field. You know, like Denzel did in a flight. But no, yeah, they're different.
I watched that on an airplane once, and like there was an off-duty pilot next to me. He goes, "Wouldn't happen. Wouldn't happen." I was like, "Really, bro? I'm trying to watch this." It's like I'm a pilot. I know that wouldn't happen.
Yeah, it's they're two different lives, but yeah, the helicopter is really, really fun to fly when you fly it with CMF, the combat maneuvering and flight. But most of the flights, you know, 9 out of 10 really are somewhat boring. Like when you're just A to B and that kind of stuff. If I'm gonna do a boring flight, I want to be comfortable. I want air conditioning. I want Wi-Fi. I want coffee pots in the back and a bathroom I can get up and go to. You know, like that kind of luxurious flying for the airline is different than I'm flying doors off in a helicopter landing in a dusty field and stuff at night under NVGs. So, you know, and the helicopter is not comfortable to sit in for an extended period of time. I did like a 5.9 hour mission, I think, one day. And It was like 5 hours of goggles at night. And they had to literally like tell me, because we were doing some stuff with some infantry unit. This is up in Michigan or whatever. And I reached my max flight duty period. Like I couldn't legally fly anymore unless the brigade commander was going to approve me. And they weren't going to wake him up at 1 o'clock in the morning to say, hey, can Alex keep flying? So they were like, yeah, you got to come back and land. And I was like, okay, cool. And I had to like peel myself out of the seat because my knees were all like locked up because the seat's not comfortable at that point. We have back problems with the gear, being on, and it was just, I mean, sweating, it's not comfortable for an extended period of time, but for a couple hours, yeah, in good weather, it's fun. It's a good time. So
I would think that. Well, I don't know if you're comparing have you ever been on like are any of your planes supersonic that you've flown?
No, we fly Mach speeds, but you're never gonna, like in the jets, you'll never go, it's not the Concorde, you're not gonna go Mach 2. It's at a certain altitude, and I won't bore you with the science of it. Like you don't fly an indicated airspeed, you fly a Mach speed. And so we fly Mach 0.78. I think I've done Mach 0.80, which is pretty fast. I mean, the ground speed on that's like 500 something knots. So you're looking at like 530 miles an hour. I mean, it's pretty fast when you're up there. But I'm sorry, you're alluding to something else in regards to the question.
Well, I would just feel like it, like comparing, like I would want someone to be like, I've flown both fighter jets and like attack helicopters, and this is what's way more fun. So I think a fighter jet would be fun as shit to fly too. Because you can't, I don't know, can you do like barrel rolls and all that and helos? I'm guessing you can't.
Well, the aircraft is capable of doing it. It's just that you can't do it. They have the famous video of the Apache doing the barrel roll. The Black Hawk, I believe, is capable of doing it based on the mechanics of it. What I will tell you on that note is, as part of my training to go fly the King Air, more recently this past year, we had to go through like an aerobatics course, so to speak. It was called all attitude upset recovery. So basically, if the airplane gets into a position where it starts spinning or doing, how to get it out, it's actually really good training. Well, we flew an aircraft called a Rogue, and it's not very well known. It's actually a prop-driven airplane, but it's extremely powerful. And to give you some perspective, and I don't have these numbers in front of me, like an F-16 can do like 7 Gs, positive 7 Gs. That's a jet, obviously a fighter jet. This particular airplane could do, I think, up to 6.6 positive Gs. And so, and it was like negative, it can do negative Gs up to like 5. I can't remember what the actual numbers were. But we went up there, and it was really cool because that's where I did barrel rolls and stuff, as comparatively, I'd never done that in the Black Hawk. And I told the instructor one day, he's like, all right, we're going to give you, we're going to do 3 Gs, a 3G pull. And you're not wearing a G suit, by the way. So all your blood and shit pools, like it's not pressurized. There's no oxygen mask like these jet jockeys wear and all this stuff. And so we did 3 Gs, I think it was like 3.1. And because there's a G meter, a digital G meter on the screen that'll show you, like once you pull it, it has like a ghost wand that'll say like, hey, this is how much you pulled. And so I was like, oh, okay. I was like, 3 Gs, that's pretty cool. Like that wasn't bad. And he's like, yeah, that's pretty much where we're going to stop for the course, because you should never pull more than that in the King Air because it will start to break the airplane. And that was on a Friday. And I was like, Sean, on Monday, I want to pull 5. And he's like, okay. He's like, we can do that. And on Monday we pulled 5.
Why not? Let's do it.
Yeah, he was all about it. Like he was like, we did barrel rolls and Cuban 8s and all this other kind of stuff, all these kind of aerobatic maneuvers. And I remember I pulled 5.2 Gs, and it was a hell of an experience. It was great. But you get so fatigued, like your body just reacts to those Gs. People don't realize that you get done with that flight and you're just tired. You're like wiped out, because your heart's pumping to get that blood and all that stuff. And it was a wild experience. It was a really great experience in this little airplane that you would never think, oh, look at that little bebopper. And it's like, no, that bitch can do 6 Gs, like it's pretty cool.
That would be nuts to experience that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like flying. I don't like being, I am not a fan of flying. Like, and I think it's not because of the act of like actually like having to go through like turbulence and all that. I don't like not being in control. Like I don't know the guy who's flying me, and I've got to put all my faith that he knows what he's doing. I don't like that idea. I don't trust people that much, but I am not a fan of getting up, but I would love to do something like that.
Yeah.
Like experience what a G turn is like, that would be just awesome. I mean, I love roller coasters, so I imagine that would be fun.
I feel like they probably have rides and amusement type stuff out there that does shit like that.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm going to the fair tomorrow.
Probably not as extreme, but
yeah, I think you could. I think in order, I would tell you, Joe, to try and go to that course, but I think you have to meet certain qualifications to even go fly that. Like, because you can pay, like, I don't know how much that course costs, but I know it's not cheap. But you have to have like X amount of flight hours even to go and experience that and to learn that kind of stuff, because they don't want Ryan to just show up there and be like, all right, take me up in an airplane.
I can imagine Ryan doing that. Hey guys, I'm here to fly.
Let's
But
go.
you can go down and you personally can go find an airport and go see if there's a quick Google search, right, will tell you if there's an aerobatic flight thing, and you can go in there and do it. Like, they'll take you up for an hour and do barrel rolls and stuff like that. It'll be
when I was my 16th birthday, there's a place right over here off of 85, an old like grass runway. Yeah, old like bi-wing planes and sandpipers and all that. And there was a dude, my dad like paid for me to, on my 16th birthday, go up in this old World War I bi-wing, and we didn't do barrel rolls. He like rocked the plane a bunch though. Yeah. That was cool as shit, but it was open cockpit and we flew around for like an hour and a half. I had a blast doing that.
That's badass. Yeah.
And I'm trying to convince my wife to do this. I guess there are places around the country where you can go up and do like simulated flight combat, like dogfighting.
You can.
Yeah, I've seen these places. I'm like, babe, we should totally try this. My wife is not about it. She's like, no, fuck that noise. I do not want to do this.
I looked into, they have, of course, this is a pipe dream for me, but there is a company over the US that does, they bought Russian fighter jets. And, because they're demilitarized and yada, yada, they don't have the weapon systems on them. And just to get them over here is a headache, but they charge you about $3,000 for an hour is what it is, but they'll take you up in it and they'll do that kind of stuff. But I'm like, you got to pay to, for me as a pilot, I'm like, that's a lot of money I got to spend to fly when I normally get paid to fly. So, but there is a niche out there for people to do, because who wouldn't want to go into a MiG-29 and go, 300 miles an hour and do a barrel roll? I mean, that sounds fun, but it doesn't sound fun when I cut the check for $3,000,
Yeah, I like my money more. I mean, there's other stuff I'd rather use that money for.
Well, it's a hell of a lot cheaper than the current space travel.
That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not spending $250,000 to go up into space.
Yeah.
It's like, you can have that. Like, you keep.
I want nothing to do with that as a pilot. I that scares the ever living shit out of me to be up there in space.
You don't want to fly a penis?
Huh?
I said, you don't want to fly a penis?
No,
giant penis.
No, I don't want to be that far away from Earth. You know what I mean? Like,
can we go back down now?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure flying in space is much different than having to fly in regular Earth's atmosphere.
Well, because I mean, down here you're fighting gravity, and up there
up there, I mean, the laws of motion apply. Like, if you like even have a little bit of gas going one way, it pushes you until something else stops you. So you can just keep going like that forever.
Yeah, that worries me. Like, you got to have enough oxygen up there. Like, if we have a problem on the airplane with depressurization, we can be down into an oxygen environment in probably about 15 to 20 minutes. If you're in space and you got a crack or a leak in a hose somewhere, you're done. That's it. Like,
yeah,
that just scares me.
This little thin piece of plexiglass is protecting you from the vacuum of space.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, thank you. I get it, but not me.
I would want to go to space. Like, I don't know. Like, there's part of me that's like, yeah, fuck yeah, let's do it. And the other part of me is like you, like, no, fuck that. That's stupid. We are not meant to be up there. So why would we do that?
So I have mixed feelings about it, and this is why. Because the premise. So I listened to a podcast, and Alex, I think you should listen to this. It's called Business Wars. It's by Wondery. They just did, I want to say it was, I can't remember, but I think it was American Airlines versus Southwest. And when they do it, it's very story oriented, and it starts at the beginning. So it starts like they did one that was like Nintendo versus PlayStation or something like that. And Nintendo started as a playing card company in the late 1800s overseas. So these are very fascinating stories. So I just listened to the one that was SpaceX versus Blue Origin. I believe that was Jeff Bezos' company. And so the premise of why these guys want to get up there, I think, is respectable. The issue that I have with it is once we achieve that, once it's like a regular thing and a normal thing, certain people are going to get to decide how it's used. And so being able to get up there, I can appreciate, especially in a sense of, you know, if they want to preserve Earth's environment or whatever the case may be. But one of the ideas I heard was that all industrialization is moved to, say, Mars. So you're talking about manufacturing, you're talking about mining and all that. And so when they make those decisions, now you're going to have regulations put in place based off of the planet. And I don't know that I really agree with that as much.
How long that would take? Like, you're a logistics guy, right? You're operations like me, so you have a logistical mind. Do you know, like, if we moved all manufacturing to Mars, how fucked we would be? You know how long it takes to get to Mars?
I mean, I think
you know what kind of planning that's going to require.
I see where you're coming from,
18 months just to get from Earth to Mars.
I think right now, like thinking about it with the capabilities we have now, I agree with you. But what we're not taking into consideration when talking about that is the technology that doesn't exist yet. So either the speed or the technology, you know, heaven forbid they ever figure out how to do that shit in Star Trek or Star Wars, where you just push a button and you're somewhere else.
Make it so, number one.
Good Lord. Because I don't know if you guys have seen it, but I watched this show called Upload, and I can't wait for season 2. But basically, the idea of the show is when you die, or I should say die, because right at the brink of your death, they're like, hey, we got to do these surgeries and we can't help you survive, or you can't afford it or whatever. So they upload your consciousness to a forever after. Okay. So that's the premise of the show. And then the same thing is what they did with Walt Disney and other people, where they freeze them. So they take these bodies and in the show, they try to download this one guy, like the richest guy on earth. They try to download him and it goes, hey, it does not work. And he dies. And that's the type of shit I think about when them coming up with technology like that. It's like, it's going to be miserable before any of it actually works. It's like a horror movie.
You can have it. You can have that.
Not in my life.
Yeah, I was going to say,
when I
probably
when
won't
I
be
die,
around.
Let me die. Let my conscience go with me.
Yeah.
No, you can have that.
Yeah. I did hear rumors. I don't know if you guys have heard anything, but I heard rumors about them looking into possibly trying to bring one of those people back to life.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
It's impossible. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, tinfoil hat rabbit hole.
I'm interested to watch as a spectator, but I agree with you. It'll fail.
It'll fail miserably.
There's been too many shows and whatnot that back that premise. But anyways, so Alex, I want to change it up a little bit here because you touched on it a little bit with the when you talked about family. What did you say? Family pay.
Family and pay. Yeah.
Yeah. So leading soldiers. So you know, I'm sure you have at this point quite a bit of leadership experience, but if you take a look at bad leadership and good leadership, like what are some things you've learned throughout your career, and give us a perspective of how that applies, like from a reservist standpoint.
Yeah, I think that's a great question because, you know, the one helps me with the other, right? So being, you know, leader in the reserves helps me kind of in the day-to-day civilian life thing, if you want to say that, if I have any leadership there. But, you know, I think you can look at any military branch or any corporation, really. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the military, about what toxic leadership looks like or bad leadership looks like. And unfortunately, I kind of believe that you need to have some of that because you need to see what it looks like in order to not do it, right? Like, what does wrong look like? Stepping back on that conversation about that 104 that turned 05 that told me I'll never do this. You know, it's how about let's talk about a realistic perspective of, hey, it's hard to achieve this, but you can. And here's how, right? I've had plenty of people come to me and say, hey, how do I do this? I got a pretty good story. Remind me to tell you the story. We'll just call it the story because it's pretty good. But, you know, when it comes down to leadership and leading people, I just don't feel, you know, like we talked about 3 things, food, family, and pay. That makes you feel like you're being taken care of, you know, but also just not being a dick, for lack of a better term. You know, you can't be that person. I mean, if somebody does something really fucked up, then yeah, I got it. Like you kind of need to come down with a hammer on them. And I've had some of those experiences, but you know, you got to work with people. That's at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. People to me are, when I've had soldiers beneath me, pilots as well, you know, you gotta understand their perspective. I had a lot of people that had families, you know, literally kids and wives and stuff like that. And I don't. So I would tell them, I say, hey, look, I don't have what you have. I don't have the same perspective, but I can understand and I will work with you on it because I can only imagine what it's like to have a kid who's in the hospital or sick for whatever reason and work with them on their schedule and stuff. And I think that that's how you really get there. I had a boss tell me a long time ago, there's a difference between compliance and commitment, right? And it really rang true to me because you are in the military, you have to comply. That's really what it comes down to. Like you're told to do something, you do it. Like a good soldier, you just do it. But there's a difference of being committed to what you're doing and seeing the value in what the mission is and things like that. And it's hard because there's times like, you know, you get done with a long mission and you got to do this inventory and all this shit. And that's just complying with what you got to do. But when you're getting ready to go, you're committed to going on this mission. So there's like a difference there. And I think it's an ebbs and flows of you're going to go through long periods of compliance and then you turn into commitment. And it's how, as a leader, how do we get people to do that? You know, leadership is getting somebody to do something they wouldn't normally do and getting them to do it on their own. And how do we, you know, you have to believe in me as a leader. You have to believe in me as a pilot. You know, as a pilot, how do I lead pilots? Okay, well, let's start with me being a good pilot. I may not be the best. Let's start with me being a really good pilot so they can say, and I would look at guys and I would tell them, I think I flew with every single pilot in my company. And I told them all that. I said, once you reach a certain, I can't fly when they're straight out of flight school because they're not signed off, if you will. I said, once you get signed off, I will fly with you. And I will make it a point to do that because I can. As a pilot in command, I can do that. And we'll start there in terms of leadership. I'm not doing, and I would always tell them, I'm not doing something I'm not telling you to do something I can't do myself. I'm going to show you how to do it. And I think that's where it comes into a lot of, there's a handful of leaders out there that can't do the job, but they try and do personnel management more than, you know, working with a person. It's hard to put into words of, hey, I can do this and so should you. You know, that's leaders from the front, right? I mean, we always hear about that, but what does that mean to you? Because I'm sure there's times where you've had a platoon leader or a company commander or squad leader, you're like, this guy's a dirtbag. You know, why would I want to lead him? I had that when I was an MP, when I was enlisted. I had a platoon leader that he was not great at PT and he was kind of shaming people. And I was like, and nothing against people from Norwich, but that's where he went. He went to Norwich and he came out as a lieutenant. And I was like, man, I can do your job better than you're doing it. Why don't I just try? And here I am, you know, as an 04. So, you know, you got to have that bad leadership to see. And it's not for long, really, if you think about it. That's why we have such high turnover in terms of positions and moving out of positions and things of that nature. So it sucks as, you know, an E5 that's been in the same unit for X number of years. You just see the kind of like, oh, that's a great commander, oh, that's a bad commander, but it's always temporary. You know, when you get into, you know, deploying and shit like that, yeah, you don't really put your weak leaders in those positions to deploy. You kind of keep them in a position where they can be productive elsewhere. I'll put it to you that way. So, and, you know, some of the selection process, at least in the aviation side, there's certain requirements to be a company commander as a aviator. You know, you have to be a PIC, you know, you have to be qualified and blah, blah, blah. You know, aerosol community, it's actually, I think it's regulatory requirement for you to be, or doctrinally a requirement for you to go to aerosol school. I had already been to aerosol school. So to be an aerosol company commander and understand the ground force mission, you got to meet certain criteria. So, you know, to dive into your question a little bit more, it's like, you know, you can teach leadership. And I tried, you know, I didn't know, I wasn't this great lieutenant. I mean, you knew me as a very junior lieutenant. I made a lot of mistakes as a lieutenant, you know, and you got to make mistakes in order to learn and learn from those mistakes. And it sounds cliche, but it's true. And I was lucky that my first commander was very outspoken and he took me underneath his wing. And one of the things that he did that I'm very grateful for is he would get me and the other platoon leader and we'd get together. Now, granted, we're reservists, right? But he would be like, hey, come down to Georgetown and we're just going to do steaks and cigars and just be dudes. You know what I mean? Or, hey, we're going to go out and just do, go to a movie or go bowling, just the three of us, right? As O grades. And it developed a lot of trust that I had in him. You know, he was my boss, but he was somebody I can turn to if I had a severe problem. And I wasn't afraid to talk to him and to be personal, you know. And so I started doing that with my lieutenants. I called it was a dumb name, but I called it lieutenant time. I didn't know what else to call it. I'm Polish, whatever. I'm not creative in that essence, but, and so I'd be like, hey guys, after drill day, you guys are coming over the house, and I'd buy them like brisket or something. And we, you know, maybe have a couple beers or we take the boat out. And I said, we don't need to talk about the Army. We just need to be dudes. And that was important for them when they had challenges like, hey, I've got some pay issues. How do I square this away? Like on personal issues, or, you know, I'm having this challenge with my girlfriend, that they could approach me and talk to me about that. And when you build those relationships and that core trust within the O grade system, right, it transcends beneath it with the enlisted corps. It wasn't a, hey, I'm better than you because I'm not inviting Sergeant so-and-so out. It was, hey, I'm trying to strengthen this team here. And I would include the cadets too, because we had, I don't know if you guys had cadets at one point in active duty, but they're not yet officers. But I'd say, hey, look, this is what the officer corps should be, because you need to take care of your people. It starts with me taking care of my lieutenants, and then it goes down from there. And they don't understand, you know, they don't have as much experience as I did in terms of dealing with people, especially in the military. So they needed to learn that and see that firsthand. If we had to do a counseling or something, where I had to counsel somebody, I would have them sit in and be like, hey, this is how it's going to happen. You know, I'd brief them and I'd be like, you have to be taught how to be that leader. And sometimes it doesn't stick with people. You know, you don't have people that are you know, receptive to that, or they're just sitting there playing on their phone and, you know, going home talking about Star Wars, whatever it is. They're, you know, for lack of a better term, not mature enough to be in that position, but they've been selected for that. So I think you need to be taught from very early on what right looks like and what wrong looks like. And I had the opportunity to do that in the reserves through my number of experiences and the strong commander that I did have. And I just said, yeah, I'm going to do that too when I become a commander. And yeah, it was a reserve commander, but everybody thinks 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer. Like, that's not true for the Army Reserve Aviation Corps. To be a good leader, I was in there every day off that I had from the airlines. I was flying, or I was in the office doing evaluations or counseling statements, whatever, you know, a lot of God and country time. You know, my girlfriend now sees, you know, I'm answering emails at 10 o'clock at night still to get shit done that I'm not being paid for. But if it doesn't get done, you know, nothing moves forward. So I had a unique experience. The story that I was going to tell you was, it's probably one of my favorite stories. One of my best experiences in the military is making a difference, right? And especially being an O grade. So I was driving to work one day. I was a battalion S4 logistics guy. And, you know, I'd lived in Conroe for a couple of years at this point. And, you know, a guy calls me on the phone one day on my cell phone. I didn't recognize the number. It was from Houston. So I pick it up and I said, hello. And he's like, hey, my name's Carson. And, you know, I was giving your phone number because I want to fly helicopters. And I was like, okay, cool. This is kind of like the same question that I had, you know, way back in 2006. And so I was like, cool, man, what do you want to know? And he's like, well, I was in the military. I was a MI intelligence guy or whatever. He was enlisted E5, got out, moved back to Houston, and he was selling cars at an Audi dealership, I think, or something like that. And I was like, okay, cool. I was like, have you talked to a recruiter? And he's like, yeah, but I just don't know. I was kind of giving your phone number and seeing what we can do. So I said, okay. I spent an hour and a half on the phone with him sitting in the parking lot. And I was like, look, here's how this is going to go. It's not going to be an overnight thing, right? But here's what you need to do. You need to call this person. You need to take this test. You need to get, a physical. You need to get into the unit first, and then we can assess you to be a pilot. And that's not even a guaranteed position, right? You got to come in enlisted, and then you got to go through a board. We got to select you. We got to see some sort of commitment, right? Not just compliance, but commitment. And he's like, okay. And I've gotten these phone calls over the years where people are like, hey, I want to go fly helicopters. And then nothing ever amounts to it. Well, this guy did that, and I was thinking to myself, all right, well, at least I gave him the tools to be successful. In a couple of years, maybe I'll come back and visit the unit because I'll be somewhere else, and, he'll be flying. So, he did it. He came to the unit, he assessed, he got picked up, then he got a flight school slot, yada, yada. Well, then like a year later, I got the company commander position. He comes back from flight school, and sure as shit, he gets signed off, and I ended up flying with him. And I was like, this is an incredible, like, flash to bang to see, hey, I've given you the tools, I've given you the information, and somebody made it happen. And then I get to see the product of that. And I get to sit in the seat. And I told him, I said, you'll never have this experience again, where somebody told you to do something and then you get to experience it with. I mean, think about it. If I told you, you got to jump through all these hoops, but you'll fly a helicopter, and then in 2 years, you and I will be flying together. It's a super long committed process to do that. Not to mention all the tests and all that crap you got to pass and whatever. So it was a really unique experience when you find somebody that's so driven to do a job or to be part of a team and make it happen. Because it doesn't, think about it nowadays, and I hate to say this, not everybody, but you get people that want to do something, but they're not willing to put the work into it. You know what I'm saying? And they're not willing to stay up late. They're not willing to take days off, to do what they got to do. Running, what it takes to be in shape. You're tired. What's the easy button? Oh, have a beer and watch TV, but you should go out and work out. There's a lot of that kind of lazy mentality that society, to me, is kind of bred to be okay. And that's not successful people, in my opinion. That's not me. I can tell you that. I'm constantly working and trying to find something else to do and some ways to make money or be more successful. But a lot of people just settle, and they're like, oh, this is too hard, I'm not doing it. I'm like, yeah, well, it's hard for a reason, because not everybody can do this. Not everybody's qualified to do it. And, you can't let people tell you no. That's, at the end of the day, I think that's, it's not necessarily my leadership that allowed him to be successful. It was a lot of him doing things on his own, but I didn't have to tell him much, and he had it within himself and then I ended up being his company commander. It was really unique experience, and we had a good bond. We still do. He called me like a couple months ago. Hey, I just want to check up on you. And that makes a difference to me when you leave a unit for over a year and you still get people that are, hey, haven't heard from you in a while. What's going on? Or you show back up to a unit and you get a smile and a handshake, versus people that turn away when a leader walks in, or they specifically avoid that type of person. So I've seen bad leadership. I've seen weak leadership, but I've also been privy to great leadership. And that's, you'd be surprised. We do have that in the reserves and guard. A lot of people have this bad taste in their mouths of, the weekend warriors. But what people, I don't think, realize is it's working two jobs. There's always a careful balance. Yeah, we have a lot of respect for active duty across all four branches, but it takes a lot for somebody we had a lot of police officers in Houston. They would get done with their day shift, just like you, Ryan, and then they would drive up to Conroe to fly a helicopter for a second job. They got to leave their family and all this other stuff. It's working two jobs to commit to something that, and we have still the same requirements that active duty does in terms of flight hours. So we still got to meet that, but we have to work our other job and balance our family life with that too. So it's different. Each component has their own challenges, and no one's better than the other, in my opinion. We all poke fun at each other. The running joke in flight school was, oh yeah, you're a reservist, you know, blah, 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 this and that. And then we would laugh and be like, hey, enjoy your time in Fort Polk, because I'm not going there, you know, or I'm not going to be stationed there. So, you know, it's one of those deals. So did I kind of answer your question in regards to like the leadership piece? I mean, is there more that you want to dive into with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing you kind of made me think about is one thing we used to say in a sales company I worked for was a leader is someone who can create a leader who can create a leader. And I think you touched on that quite a bit, because if your purpose, if your perception of being a leader is to just tell someone else what to do, then it's not going to extend past you. And I think there's a lot of trickle down evidence of that in the military, where you just have bosses, people pointing their finger and saying, do this, do that. And then when that generation gets promoted, now they have no idea how to handle that position or how to handle those soldiers. But what you were talking about, how you were kind of mentored from your previous company commander, and then you took those same things and basically applied those practices yourself, that is, you know, kind of carbon copy right there, producing someone who is able to produce another leader. Because if we're not passing those skills along, then I mean, what's it really all for? We're going to end up with a force who, you know, doesn't know how to tie their own boots.
Yeah, it's, you know, when it comes down to, I used to tell guys, and it applied to flying and leadership, you know, like, hey, I'm going to teach you this, and here's why. Because someday I'm going to be gone. I'm going to be in a different unit, or, you know, down the road, and it does me no good to take that knowledge with me and take it and just not give it to somebody. Not, you know, I want to leave it behind. I want you to learn these skills so that you can teach other people down the road. Because yeah, I might have all these skills, but it doesn't benefit me moving forward. It doesn't benefit the greater good of the unit. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like it goes hand in hand with just like what you're saying, like creating another leader. Yeah. And like we talked about, not all leaders can be created in an equal fashion. And I've seen that through lieutenants. I've had good lieutenants and I've had okay lieutenants, right? But if I give them that knowledge, they're going to be better commanders down the road. And I would tell them that. You know, I had one kid one time, he was a cadet at A&M, and he was very soft-spoken. You know, I don't know his background and what he dealt with previous leadership. And, you know, one night I called him up about something, and I said, hey man, what do you want to do? Do you want to go? I thought he wanted to be a veterinarian, you know, because he went to A&M. He's like, no, I want to be a pilot. I said, have you told anybody this? Like, you're 6 months out from getting your commission, or 8 months out. And he's like, no, I mean, I mentioned it one time, but, and I said, okay, all right. So I started making some phone calls, and we jumped through all these hoops, and he got branched aviation, you know, and I called him back one day, and he's like, oh, and, you know, thank you so much. You know, I really want to do this. And I said, look, man, when you become a company commander, you need to remember this experience, and you need to do it for your dudes and dudettes, right? Because if you're not outspoken, you need to probe and get the information. What do people want to do, and help them? Because you can sit there as a company commander and do nothing and point fingers, just like you said, but you know, you're not helping. You may not be helping people as much as you want to. And I said, you need to remember this leadership experience, because you're going to be in a position to influence that down the road. And I think he took a lot from that. We ended up, actually, my last flight in the Black Hawk, we flew to College Station, oddly enough, and he commissioned right in front of the Black Hawk. I was there, and I told my lieutenants, granted we're reservists, right? I told him, I said, you guys will do everything in your power to take Friday off, and we're all going to fly to this ceremony, and he's going to commission, and we all should be there for him during this transition. And we were, and we, you know, met his mom, his girlfriend, all that stuff. But you don't see that very often in the reserves too much, I would say, because we all have other jobs, right? So we may not be able to be there, but you have to tell leaders sometimes how to lead. And it may be by example, but it's like, hey, not holding their hand to get them there, but, you know, it's like, hey, we're going to do this. You're going to do your best to get the time off, because this is our brother that he wants to be like us, and we're going to be there for him. And when I commissioned, that was the exact same thing. My chain of command was there. So I think some of those positive experiences are what carry over. And if you have toxic leadership within a unit, it has the ability to get better, but you have to be the good person in that unit to kind of start that change. If it stays toxic, it's going to be toxic. A broken car that's rolling down the road that doesn't get fixed is just going to keep breaking. And a lot of people, I won't say a lot of people, there's probably people that are just okay with it being broken, then move to another unit, and that's it. Well, for reservists, like a lot of guard guys are in their unit for decades, and they'll brag about their units being well-oiled machines because they've got it down. They're all been there. And for so long, they can see good and bad leadership, and then they don't take the bad leadership anymore. They literally just kick them out of the unit and things of that nature, I guess, but that's kind of the way I look at leadership. And those kind of experiences help you with your day-to-day life and making decisions and what you have to do, how small it may be, but making a decision is important. And so you can't do that. I had an old sergeant major. He said, make a decision, right, wrong, or indifferent. But you have to make a decision. And I think there's some people that are just afraid to make decisions or aren't bred to be that type of person. And those kind of leaders fizzle out. There was an article that was written, and I don't remember the publisher, but they said leadership in the military breeds some mediocrity. And here's why. The bad leaders get pushed out and the really good leaders get frustrated and get out. Yeah. And then you have that middle meat that's not necessarily bad, but they continue to move up the chain. And then you have mediocre leadership that's in a more powerful position that doesn't have that great experience. And so my perspective on it was, hey, look, like if I can see good leadership, let's try and keep them in. How do we do that? It's not going to benefit me in the long run. It's going to benefit, the military and subsequently other people beneath them. But it's kind of true. You can see it. If you stick around long enough, you're going to make 05. That's kind of, as long as you don't do anything illegal, immoral, or unethical, you're going to make 05 and, that kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, well, what kind of 05 am I going to be? You see it. And I don't know, I kind of went off on a tangent there, but it's one of those. And I think being a reservist, it's a little bit more, for me personally, I don't hinge on my evaluation, right? There's a lot of people out there, enlisted or not, that they're like, oh, my evaluation's everything. My evaluation, I need to get promoted. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. The airlines, I'm still going to go to work, whether I have a good evaluation or a middle block or whatever. So I can stand up and say the things that people don't want to hear and not be fearful of an evaluation. So it's kind of fun. And I like doing that. I like putting people on blast or on fire or trying to get somebody fired, like a third party, whatever that works for us, like a contractor, getting them fired is fun for me. Like if you suck at your job, go find another job. Don't work for me. And I've fired people before. I've gotten it done. It was a pain. It's not easy to do, but I just was like, this is not good. And we need to get them the hell out of here.
People. I hate it. So I hate firing people. It's the worst. Like, I don't look forward to it. I have fired a lot of people. Like, I've called people into my office.
But,
like,
when you think about it, like, especially when it comes down to firing someone, like there is something that is taking place. Yeah. So
it's not ever something I've just been like, you know what? That person's an asshole. Come into my office real quick. You're fired. Right. No, I mean, I'm of the coach them up, coach them out mentality. You're going to choose what type of employee you're going to be. Like, I'm going to give you every opportunity to be a better employee.
Yeah.
And work up to, what the standard is, whatever our standards are. But I don't take pleasure in doing it. I've had to do it a lot.
I will say this, it's not like I enjoy firing people for no reason. Like my perspective on that is I'll come to somebody if they're, coach counsel and whatever, like you said, right? Whether it be civilian or not, is, hey, look, I've said to one particular instance, I said to a guy, I go, hey, look, if you fucked up, it's okay. Just let me know. We'll work through it, and, there's been a couple hiccups here, but he was like, no, it's not me. It's someone, he's pointing the blame. He's playing the wounded dog. And I came to him again. I was like, hey man, look, I'm looking into this. Like, just let me know. Like, I don't, want anything bad. I can cover some of this up, or make it correct some issues. And he was just adamant about him not being wrong. And then the IG ended up doing an investigation, found out he was the source cause. And I was like, you're done, bro.
Done.
Like, we're done here. He didn't, I called his bluff,
I think Alex, one of my main questions with that is, you're talking about the military, right?
Yeah, he was a civilian contractor that worked directly for me.
Okay, because I was like, I've heard of people getting fired. Like my company commander, one of my company commanders at Fort Hood got fired because he was doing some extremely unethical shit. But I've never seen that process from like an officer's perspective. So I'm like, when an officer gets fired, like how does that work? What happens?
That's a good question, because I've only seen really one get fired, and it was a significant rank, and I was like, oh fuck, and you just kind of know, like, that person's been relieved. I'm sure there's a process in terms of counseling statements and that kind of stuff before you go for a relief for cause. But generally speaking, it doesn't happen unless you do something really fucking bad. I mean,
yeah.
I have faith and value in saying that the leadership, especially the ones that I've been around, they don't do anything to that extreme, like maybe your case, that these people won't get fired, or that they need to get fired. I mean, you do have, like we talked about, it's the upper out, these lieutenants that maybe don't make the cut to be a commander, they get put in staff and they get a job that they can't really get fired because they're not really doing anything wrong. They're producing op orders or whatever. Versus, you have your commanders that are in these positions that are selected for command based on their ability to lead. So when it comes down to relieving officers, man, I don't think I know enough about it, because I never thought I would be in that position, And when you see it happen, it's kind of like you do the meme with the side eye,
Yeah.
the little, it's like, oh, well, I don't know what happened there, but yeah, I just kind of stay out of that. Because it doesn't really often happen. So, not that I've seen.
Any officers get fired? Have you seen that happen?
Yeah. It was
I've
bad.
never seen that happen.
The base, like, just one of the incidences that I know took place, is, so he's company commander, and basically he had us, because at Fort Hood, Alex, the motor pool is like behind the unit, like across the block. And then the Connexes with all of the equipment in them were on the back line. So that's all the way through the motor pool on the back side. And he had the detail, instead of doing it traditionally, like, you lay the shit out and the company commander goes over there with a clipboard and counts everything. He had them bring the stuff over to his office. And then if it's like, say it's a Mark 19 tripod, those things are heavy, and they bring them in. Obviously his office can't hold everything, so they're like bringing in all the Mark 19 tripods and laying them out, and then picking them back up and taking them back, and then doing the next thing. And to top it off, it was raining like a motherfucker when this was taking place. So I don't know what the final determination was, but basically it was an abuse of power. It was like, just because you can make them do this because you outrank them, and
that sounds like hazing. I mean, that's what that sounds like.
It was bad. And the thing is, like, when you look at hazing, like you and I have talked about before, it's like the senior guys poking fun at the younger guys, and you just kind of earning your keep. Whereas this is like just a straight up, like, these guys didn't do anything wrong. They were lower enlisted. It was like, you're on this detail to do the layout for the company commander. And in my 10 years in the Army, we had never done that. And so we didn't know if it was because he didn't want to go over there while it was raining, or if it was him using an excuse like, oh, I don't have time to go over there because I have to also do this thing on my computer. But he ended up getting relieved of duty. And I don't know what happened to him, but we got a new commander almost overnight.
The only time I've ever heard of someone getting relieved of command was the dude who was on social media posting all those videos. The
Yeah.
Marine down at
Lieutenant Colonel Scheller.
yeah.
Yeah, I just saw
Like
his,
that was like that's the only time I've ever. I mean, I've seen enlisted guys get relieved of command. Like I've had a squad leader who was not worth his salt, so all they did was transfer him to basically headquarters platoon.
Well, I mean, I've had
That was
5
it.
Article 15. I had 5 Article 15s when I was in,
Well,
and when I got
shift bag,
oh,
apparently.
very much so, very much so. But when I got my first one in Iraq, obviously, immediately no longer in charge of soldiers. Like I played gunner on the way back to VBC. Because it was like, you're not in charge of a truck, you're not in charge of soldiers, you don't get to go to the bathroom by yourself. Like, so that's
what the
that's
fuck
like
did you do
as an enlisted person. I Barney Fifed it. Yeah.
I Barney Fifed it.
Oh, trust me. Like if I told you, well, no, yeah, that was my first one. Because my second Article 15 was a summarized, and this kind of goes back to what you were talking about leadership wise, Alex, is this guy was like the worst squad leader I've ever had. So 11 years time in service. He came off of recruiting duty, had no deployment. He pulled me aside one day and was like, hey, you're the senior guy. You just got back from Iraq. We're about to go to the field. I need you to teach me how to run the radios. He couldn't turn on and off a SINGARS or an ASIP radio. So I had to show him everything. I had to show him how to load it with ANCD and the whole kit and caboodle. And then all of a sudden he has it out for me. And I had no idea why. I don't know.
You were a threat to him.
But he put 5 charges. I doubt it, because he was a staff sergeant. Like I wasn't looking at becoming squad leader anytime soon, but they put 5 charges on the Article 15, like disrespect, dereliction of duty, this, that, and the third, and it went up to legal and came back. And they sent 5 charges up, and legal came back and said, well, you can use these 2, but these other 3 are bullshit. Like you don't have the evidence, you don't have the paperwork to back it up. So they threw a 3rd one on there and sent it back. It got approved, and it was a summarized, and it was it was 14 days of extra duty right before I went to Germany. So I just knocked it. There was no demotion. There was nothing like that. So I knocked out the extra duty, and
I had 1 page 11. That was it.
Well, I mean, you and I have talked, and I compare page 11s to counseling statements. And in the Army, you get at a minimum, you get a monthly counseling statement, because that's growth and development.
Yeah, we would get monthly counseling. We would get counseling statements that periodically, like this is like, we call them pro-con marks.
Yeah, but page 11s aren't like NCM, like UCMJ.
No, page 11s, there can be a disciplinary result from a page 11. So you can be restricted to barracks on a page 11.
Okay.
Like
it sounds like a summarized.
Yeah, I mean, it's up to I think a page 11 is just up to your local command.
But what I'm saying with the whole leadership thing and what Alex talked about is obviously this guy was like one of the worst leaders that I thought I have ever seen. And one day I came into PT, and there was a situation where a buddy of mine needed help. It was his family, but he had to work the road, and I was on platoon duty. And we both explained it, because we were in separate platoons. We explained it to our leadership. And when I told that guy what I had going on, I said, look, it doesn't necessarily have to be me, but he needs somebody to watch the kids or whatever. He just looked up and he said, go home. And what's crazy about it is the platoon sergeant and the platoon leader were right there. So traditionally, this guy was one of those ones who couldn't make a decision. He always had to consult the senior leadership. But in this scenario, he's like, hey, you said that guy's having problems. We'll address everything we need on his end. His wife or ex-wife, whatever the case was elsewhere. You go home, you take care of business, you watch his kids. He can go work the road, and like without hesitation, that's the one time. So I do think it's interesting how sometimes those people who we perceive as bad leaders can still possess some good leadership qualities, in that without hesitation, he was like, that soldier needs to take care of his family, and you're going to help. Ready, set, go.
Hey, food, family, and pay, man. That's what it's right there. You hit it, and when I listen to that, yeah, food, family, and pay. I used to ping my lieutenants. I'd be like, what are my 3 priorities? you know, and it'd be like, pay and food, you know, like, I'm like, you guys nail this down. This is my mantra, you know, when I was a commander. But, you know, when it comes down to leadership too, again, like what you're saying is there is discretion at a certain point where you as a leader can say, no, I'm not going to give you a page 11, or no, I'm not going to give a counseling statement. You know, I call it the pattern of behavior. I don't put things on paper until I see a pattern of behavior that I don't like, that's not benefiting the unit, right? No. And you have to do it a couple times, really. You know, you can't, everybody screws up in life, right? But you can't have the hammer drop on you because you bought the wrong toothpaste, you know, or whatever. You parked in the wrong parking spot. I don't know, but you can't have that. And to me, that's very problematic with certain leadership, because I've had people tell me of rank, you need to counsel this guy, and I want to see the counseling statement. And I was like, okay, you know, like, roger that, sir, get it done. You know, do you think they asked for the counseling statement in their email? No, it's, hey, come into my office, let me talk to you about this. This is what's supposed to happen. Here's what's really going to happen. You know, we're going to have this discussion. And I'm like, I don't see value in putting this on paper. I'm not trying to get you fired or, you know, rank or whatever. But it just seems to me like some of the experiences you had, Ryan, were very much the opposite, aside from that one story where you just got the hammer dropped on you for some shit, you know, or maybe you were the example. They try to make somebody the example of, you know, hey, this is what will happen if you fuck up. And it's like, that's not, I don't want people to live underneath me or above me in fear of fascism. You know, as leadership, that's just, you know, I'm not going to be committed at that point to doing the job. I'm going to look to go elsewhere. You know, it's not fun.
I think one of, you know, there were a lot of benefits. I would never choose to put myself in those situations again. But there came a certain point in time where I had soldiers who I was able to counsel and mentor and say, look, you know, you got in trouble. You're facing this non-judicial punishment. This is what you need to do. You need to go to legal. You need to talk to this person. You need to look for this. You need to get these letters of character witnesses and recommendation, because I had been through it. So because I heard when I was at Fort Polk, there was a squad leader who had 11 Article 15s in his career, staff sergeant. But they were all summarized. So you can basically get summarized Article 15s left and right, and it won't be detrimental to your career. And I was like, wow, when I was a PFC and I heard him say that, I was like, no, he's wrong. Like, I'm never going to get an Article 15. Like, you're not a real soldier unless you've had at least one Article 15. I'm like, no, these people are crazy. And then, you know, after I got one, I got another one, and I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe there's certain circumstances, like, because we all make bad decisions.
See, Article 15 sound a lot like page 11s.
I just work here.
That's what they sound. They sound the exact, like, as you
we call it an Article 15 because it comes from Article 15 in the Manual for Courts Martial. So the UCMJ. So that's why we call it that. But the Air Force,
they call them page 11s because they come out of the 11th. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've heard you call them ninja punch before.
That's the non-judicial punishment.
Yeah,
that's an NJP. Yeah,
and then the Air Force calls them something completely different.
The ninja punch. That's what I call them.
I'd have to.
I didn't know that many guys who got ninja punch. Like, I knew guys who got.
Well, yeah, but in the Marine Corps, like, you can lose out on an opportunity to get promoted because you didn't get your hair cut.
Yeah.
So that's like way different. In the Army, they have to counsel you, and then you get flagged and you don't get promoted. And then if you do it 3 times, like what Alex was talking about, now you have 3 counseling statements, and they're like, oh, now we recommend you for an Article 15 because you have 3 pieces of evidence showing that you don't like to get haircuts.
Yeah. So if you had 3 page 11s, you got a ninja punch. You got an NJP. And a ninja, you could get an NJP, which was very, very, like, that's where it went up to like battalion, and battalion you could request a court martial at that point if you got NJP'd, or you could just take the summary NJP, which is basically battalion commander is now going to come down and hammer you, and just say, you're getting, you know, forfeiture of pay, demotion, reduction in rank or whatever he decides.
Yeah, the only time you can turn down a non-judicial punishment or Article 15 unless you're on a boat. That's the only time you can't turn down in Article 15. The risk there, because I got a field grade down at Fort Hood, and I was talking to my lawyer, and I was like, oh, what if I turn it down? Like, I think this is bullshit, because the circumstances surrounding it involved like 7 people. Okay, so it wasn't like if I was the only one who had done what I did, it was we were getting off shift, and an accepted practice was if the entire shift was walking back to the arms room, but you still had a case, then you could pass your weapon off and they turn in and the armor could go home. And you could finish your case and then you could go home, instead of the armor having to wait in the arms room for 4 hours while you do your paperwork. So I had one guy transport my 9mm back. He put it in another kid's bag. They forgot about it when they got to the arms room. So that other kid drove home to his off-post residence. So he had a government 9mm in his privately owned vehicle.
It's like a base lockdown at that point.
At his private residence. And then the E7 on staff duty was, he was my platoon sergeant. He came through, and the guy on CQ was a squad leader or team leader from another platoon. And he told him, because the armor was like, hey, he checked the sign-in sheet and they were like, oh, you're missing one Y, this, that, and the third. And so that's when it came to light. And so, even though that other kid had a government weapon in his POV and at his residence and this, that, and the third, oh shit,
you're about to, we might lose you here. If we just got a low battery on the computer. Well, now we're getting into the minutia of what's the difference, punishments that the branches give, which we get into.
Did you plug it in?
Yeah, we're good. I just forgot to plug it in when I put it there, but yeah. So instead of, and I even talked to one of the guys involved that I had handed the weapon to, and I was like, hey, I'm talking to legal, like, what if I just bring up all these other names and explain the situation? So basically what I was looking at is if I turned down the Article 15 and we went to a court martial and I dropped these 6 other names and explained the entire story, which this makes sense. The lawyer's like, that's not going to get you off the hook, because what I was being charged with dealt with me not being the one to sign out and sign in my weapon. Okay. They're also going to get brought into this. All of you are going to get punished in one fashion or another. You're not going to get out of it. And now you're going to have 6 other guys that hate your guts because you got them in trouble as well.
Right.
That was long and short of it. And then when I was getting out dealing with that and another field grade, they were like, look, you can totally turn down these Article 15s and go to a court martial. But number one, you're looking at prison time. If you turn down an Article 15 and don't accept the non-judicial punishment, well, yeah, but if you look at the minimum and maximum punishment, it's like if the minimum punishment is 1 week, what's the word? I wouldn't call it imprisonment because they don't necessarily. Yeah, well, not restriction, but like if you're looking at 7 days of jail time, basically. And that's the minimum, and the maximum is 6 months imprisonment. It's a lose-lose scenario if you get convicted. And then when I get out, I have a record.
Right.
If you go through a court martial, you have a record when you get out. And I was like, none of that sounds like a possible win. So I took the Article 15. I mean, at the end of the day,
had a lot of bad experiences, right?
It does sound like you have a lot of bad experience.
If I look at these situations and I try to say, oh, well, these 6 other guys fucked me or this person fucked me, then I can't really do anything about that. So I always look at these situations, and it was years ago, almost 10 years ago now that a lot of this stuff happened. So me getting out, one of the circumstances surrounding that was this girl. I was at a party with like 30 some people, and this girl accused me of stealing her medication. And that's basically what led to me getting out of the military. And so if I look at that and I say, well, she's an asshole and he's a dick of a friend, and these 29 other people that were at the party should have fessed up and, told them who actually took the medication, to set and a third, I can't do anything about that. But what I can do is recognize that I am a product of my environment. You are who you hang out with. If you're the average of your 5 closest friends and 4 of them are bad people, you're probably going to be a bad person. So what I took from that experience is, instead of blaming other people, I said, I just need to find better friends and associate with better people. So if I had been spending more time around someone like, say, Alex, instead of these,
you'd be a pilot.
Instead of the
you'd be doing cool shit like him, not sitting on some guy's couch with a microphone.
Yeah, instead of these people that like to drink and party every night and apparently hang out with medication thieves, then maybe I would still be in the military. So what I did when I got out is I immediately started to change the people I associate myself with. And now here I am. We have a talk show.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that, because I used to work out a lot, and I had a coach tell me one time, he's like, yeah, you don't want to go to that gym. And I was like, why? He's like, because you'll be the strongest person in that gym, which is not saying much, right? And he equated it to, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. You could be the strongest guy in the gym if you wanted to, but where's it really going to push you to be? You're just going to plateau. And, I started to surround myself, oddly enough, just not by choice, but a lot of my friends, a handful of them became successful, and then they hung out with more successful people. And, you kind of get into that, and you have these discussions, when it comes down to, I guess, finances at minimum. You're like, oh, I never thought about that. It's like, yeah, well, I've never been in an environment where somebody wanted to talk about buying a catamaran and leasing it in the Bahamas and getting a net income off of it. Like, never would have thought about that, being at a party drinking with 30 other people, something of that nature. So I kind of live by that mantra too, like, surround yourself with people that are smarter than you are, and you eventually will be what you would consider smart. Like I don't think I'm a smart guy by any means, but I definitely surround myself with people that are to learn, So yeah, I agree. Kind of going back on what you were saying, like, you wouldn't have put yourself in those environments or those positions. People are products of their own decisions, right? I'm not saying you personally, but you're just in a bad spot. I'm not saying hanging out with me would have been any better, because back then, I'm not who I am.
I'm going to go
now,
ahead and say yes, it would have been. It would have been better if you would have been hanging out with him.
Okay, so this is my one story about an experience of hanging out with Alex. So I told you that he mean mugged me
on a helicopter ride. That's a pretty awesome experience.
That wasn't hanging out. That was
sounds like you were fucking chilling.
That was like,
we got a helicopter ride. Got some steak out of it.
He was like, you need dog tags, ID card, and wear your uniform. And I was like, I'm there. But no, he mean mugged me on the side of the road because he recognized me. Come over to the house. So I go over to the house, and it's like him and at least 2 other pilots, at least. But I think there was 4 or 5 of us all together. And so we're hanging out, we're talking, we're drinking some beers. I think we had some food. And this is okay. So first of all, Black Hawk Down gets put on. And never in my fucking life, never in my fucking life would I think, if I'm in a room full of Black Hawk pilots, would they put on Black Hawk Down? Like, isn't it, to me, it just didn't make any sense. So I'm like, all right, there. And then they started to argue. Okay. So this is step 2. And I'm like, these motherfuckers are arguing, and they're like, mic model versus non-mic model. And I'm like, hey, I'm a peon over here. Like, I know how to drink this beer, but what the fuck is a mic model? And they're like, all right. So in layman's terms, it's basically the difference between driving a car manually and cruise control. It's kind of like an autopilot. And I'm like, all right, I'm with you. So they're still debating it. Which one is better? We're watching Black Hawk Down. This would happen. That wouldn't happen, left and right. And in the middle of the argument, I think it was Alex went back to his room and came back out with this TM okay, the technical manual for the helicopter, and this motherfucker had to be this thick. And he's flipping through it to read it because the debate was on like what the literal word said or something like that. And that's when I said, so you guys aren't really like I feel like in the room I was in, they were coming off a lot more like the nerds than the jocks. That was my overall perception.
You want to know something funny? I have this like weird memory, and some of the stories that you tell that you remember, that I just don't. But I specifically remember that argument because it was so heated.
I was like, I can't believe they're arguing about this shit. Like,
and it was, I remember what it was now. It was the vertical speed, basically an instantaneous vertical speed versus a vertical speed like gauge. It was about. I remember that, and I was like, and it was
triggered from the movie. The movie initiated that conversation.
Yeah. Yep. Which the movie is fairly. I mean, it's really accurate. If you look at it from a pilot's perspective, and obviously historically, but I remember because we were talking about the differences of what model they used, blah blah blah, and then it turned into like what gauge they had in there, and then I was like, no, that's not it, and like blah blah blah, and so I remember that. I remember bringing out the TM, the dash 10, and being like, no, this is it, and blah blah blah. But yeah, we nerd out. I mean, there's some stuff we really nerd out. I mean, you got to kind of be a little bit of a nerd to be a pilot. I mean, there's some of this stuff you can be an okay pilot and not be nerd out about it. But yeah, I remember that those are the kind of arguments that we do have. So, I argued with my girlfriend one time in front of my friend, and she videotaped it. It was about some airline stuff, and the girl who was videotaping had no idea what we were talking about. And then because my girlfriend's a pilot too, so it's like, I remember that time. I remember that was a good time. That was in Harker Heights. I do remember that.
Yeah.
Speaking of leadership, the guy that was on the lease for that house, the original, the leasee, I guess, and he subleased 2 rooms. One was to me, one was to my buddy Mark. That guy was not a great leader. I don't think he'll ever listen to this, but he was not great. He was an infantry guy, and there was a time he wanted to do a NFL draft pick or something like that, and he invited a bunch of junior soldiers over to his house, and he was a lieutenant at the time, and he invited, it was kind of it could have been a nice thing, he invited soldiers over with their families and stuff, but then he got into an argument with one of the dude's wives about how great the college he went to was and how shitty the college she went to was, and I'll never forget, the dude had just come back from Iraq and stood up in front of his wife and said, you went to college and got a commission, and I went to fucking combat and made a difference to our country. And he said that to his platoon leader in front of the entire platoon. And I literally just quietly walked out of the room. I was like, I'm getting the hell out of here. I want nothing to do with this. I didn't even tell them I was a pilot or a lieutenant or nothing. I was just like, I don't want these people to know who I am or what I do. I just want to be a fly on the wall. And I was like, never in my life would I think that an E5 would stand up and he was kind of right for standing up for his wife, but that was a position that I was like, hey, dude, I can't remember.
I'm not going to lie. I've been in that argument before with an officer.
Yeah. Well,
if it's the story I'm thinking about, I feel like it wasn't, because you weren't married while you were in. So.
No. So my platoon commander in Afghanistan, who I respected, he was a very good leader. And he and I used to go back and forth because I had a lot of college before.
Yeah.
I went to the Marine Corps 18 credits shy of graduating, and people were like, just fucking, that's a year. Finish your year, go to your senior year, just be a commissioned officer. I was like, no, I've got some shit going on I need to get away from.
This is the rug, and I need to sweep this shit under.
I need to make some change. I need to change my lifestyle. Anyways, so I had a platoon commander, and he kind of was like, okay, Joe's pretty fucking smart. He's a smart motherfucker. He's not just some dumb grunt.
Not your stereotypical infantryman.
And he and I we're in a debate, and it got a little heated, and he was trying to say something, and then our XO was right there, and our XO just finally looked and just goes, Valak, you don't know what you're talking. You're not as smart as us. We went to college. I turned to him. I said, you went and got 18 credits more than I did. Shut the fuck up. I was like, you didn't go write a thesis and a dissertation to get your degree. You have a degree in hospitality. Whoop-de shit. That's a step above. That's a step above underwater basket weaving.
I don't think I have ever, like Alex, you described how it was at the house. I don't think I've ever been in a situation like that, because even when I was at Fort Hood and one of the squad leaders had to get together at his house, it was all the NCOs. So it wasn't lower enlisted. There was no our platoon leader. What the one
that happens a lot in the infantry though, like because we used to do platoon functions where it would be all the NCOs, the platoon commander, and all just like the lowly privates, all like hanging out. Like we would
at a house though, at a private residence.
Yeah, hell yeah. That was quite
interesting.
Quite a regular. Like it wasn't a weekly thing, but it was like, hey, anyone who wants to come Saturday, we're going to do a barbecue, and it's going to be at Lieutenant so and so's house.
Like one of our lieutenants had a birthday one time, and we all right after we like scheduled it, we got off work a little early and we went straight out to one of the restaurants, and then we ratted on him to the waitress. So it was Pluckers. I don't know if you remember Pluckers right off post, and then they would take the cup, the cone, and put it on his head, and he wore these other things, and they gave him like wings, and they made him do a dance while they sang to him. So it was pretty entertaining, but it was like we had just gotten off work. We were all still in our uniform. It wasn't really family or anything. So we went and did that. And then you had the mandatory fun days, which were the org days. And then we would go to that in civilian clothes and bring our families. But you're still talking about like a work kind of controlled environment.
No, we would do. And I think this is because this is what makes the infantry so unique, is because when you are, and maybe this is just a Marine thing, because when you're in the infantry, I mean, and you go down range, there is no separation between officers. There's no like, this is the officer's quarter, here's the staff NCO's quarter. I mean, platoon commander sitting there digging a fighting hole right next to Private Schmuckatelli. Like he is right there getting rained on, getting pissed on, and he's living like that for 7 months, just like everybody else. So I think that's kind of why at least in the infantry, it's kind of one of those things that we just did. Like it's probably
a Marine thing too, because like when we were downrange, I mean, obviously we had hooches and stuff, but the females were separate from the males.
We didn't NCOs were separate. Have that fucking problem at all.
Well,
there was no, like, we didn't see females like at all.
Well, back then, but I assume now it's probably the same as it was in the MP Corps. The NCOs were separate from the soldiers, because I was a corporal when we went downrange, and everybody knows back when I was in, a corporal in the Army is just a specialist with stripes.
Yeah.
So my roommate downrange was a PFC. As soon as I got promoted to sergeant, they made me move rooms, and I'm like, I was already an NCO. They were like, yeah, but now you're a real NCO. And that's because it's a lateral promotion. So as quickly as they make you a corporal, they could make you a specialist. There's no change in pay. There's a little bit change in responsibility, but the same with the officers. So the lieutenants, the company commander, they all either had their own room or they shared the room with one other person, and that was it. There was no
when you're down, right? So I guess this is the difference between the Marines and the Army.
Yeah.
When you think about like Marine infantry, this is the place where it is lightning fast, quick speed. There is not a lot. We're not setting up bases. That's not what the Marine Corps is supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
The Marine Corps infantry job is to locate, close with, and destroy the enemy by fire and maneuver. Like that. Like if the enemy moves, Marine Corps infantry chasing his ass. Like that's what we're doing. So there's not a lot of time to sit. This was always my debate with, and this is going to make me sound like a terrible person, with females joining the infantry. It's not because they can't do it. It's like, I don't think you understand what's happening in the infantry.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think you watch movies and you think, oh, I took 2 showers in an 8-month span in Afghanistan. The rest of my showers was like, here's some baby wipes, or it's raining outside. This is technically your time to shower.
Hot spots, ready, say go.
Like, take off your clothes and pull out the soap. Like that was pretty much what life was like. I mean, there was no, it was, and like I've heard stories that were way worse for the guys who invaded. Like I had squad leaders who were in the initial invasion of Iraq, and they were like, "Yeah, bro, this is the Hotel Ritz Carlton compared to what the opening waning days of Iraq was like." Like I had a platoon commander who was like, "Yeah, dude, I was like balls deep in Iraq. Like we crossed the line from, and we were going." Yeah. And he was like, "We slept in bombed out houses, and then like that was it. We got in, we kept going." Yeah, and that's just how the infantry is.
And I mean, I agree with you on I think a lot of times when, especially when it's someone, a female who's not in the military, saying that females can do it as well. It's
they
like,
absolutely,
it's not
speaking, yes.
Yeah, it's not that. I mean, we had a girl in my unit who exceeded the 300 score on the male scale of the PT test. So she was more badass than all of us put together. But it's like at the end of the day, I think there's certain things that you're not taking into consideration there. For example, one shower every 4 months.
I smelled great. Smelled great.
So Alex, Joe talked about it a little bit. Well, yeah, I think you were going to put your 2 cents in. So go ahead.
Well, I think that, it's interesting to hear the disparity between, maybe the disparity is not the great word, but between the Army and how their camaraderie happens with the Marines, and the Marines do it, as a big family function to everybody being at the house. But I also think that there's a certain trust level there that everybody's going to take care of everybody and nothing's going to go wrong, like what happened at the house in Arthur Heights that one night. It seems to me like that Marine Corps mentality builds a stronger team, in my opinion, or builds a strong team. I won't say stronger. So I can appreciate the fact that the Marines do that. And 2 of my best friends, they were both Marines. One was a recon guy. And, it's just like the endless trust that you have for somebody. He took care of all my stuff when I was deployed and my car and yada, yada. So I can really appreciate that kind of mentality when it comes down to the Marine Corps. But that's what I was going to say about that, the difference between the two. The separation of officers and enlisted. There is some of that, in the Army. I've seen less of that, to be honest with you. I've North Fort Hood, I'd be in the bunks, lieutenant sleeping on the top bunk and some E4 being underneath me, and that's North Fort Hood, and I don't think it makes them I think that kind of helps because it shows like, hey man, I'm going through the exact same thing you are, just like out in the field digging a hooch and having a private right next to you. Like there is some of that,
Well, I mean I think that would happen in the Army as well. In the 11 Bravo units, it's the esprit de corps in the Marine Corps is definitely much, I think, different. It's very, you're not going to find that anywhere else.
Right. No,
the esprit de corps that happens in the Marine Corps, and this is Marine wide, is that you will not find, you won't find that anywhere in any other branch of service in the military. I think that's what is unique to the Marine Corps, in general.
And I mean, when we went to the field, like at Fort Hood, Fort Polk, and it was a platoon exercise, like, sure, the platoon leader is right there, especially like one time we went at Fort Hood and it's a building. Yeah. And this room, there were 2 rooms, and this room was exceptionally larger than this one. Yeah. So all the lower enlisted got this side with the cots, and all the leadership got this side. And then it's like there's a team leader, a squad leader, the platoon leader, a platoon sergeant, all cots in a row right there, so we're definitely, you don't always see that separation because it depends on what's there. So when we went to Iraq and we took over on pad 15, all of those things already existed there. So you're talking about anywhere from 1 to 3 people sharing a room. It's like, if you're going to have 3 people sharing a room, well, we have to make sure that they're all males or they're all females, or we have to make sure, because you're talking about a locked door, you're talking about, especially in the MP Corps, because we have males and females, like making sure that we stay mission focused. And, right, obviously if we have that mixture and we have the availability, if we're going to put 3 people in a room, we're not going to make it like 1 male and 2 females. Well, that doesn't,
the thing back to the us gather, how we would gather, when there was always everybody knew this, once alcohol got introduced, rank no longer existed. So if my platoon command, if I'm at a bar with my platoon commander and there's all of us are there and he's drinking beers, at that point, he is no longer in charge of me. He cannot turn to me and it's like, hey man, I'm your platoon commander. You need to go do this. I can be like, oh, bro, like you're intoxicated at this point. Like I no longer have to follow that order. Like, because that we're not doing that downrange. We don't have alcohol in training or in combat. So, but there's also, you know, in the situation that you mentioned, Alex, if we're in a house and shit like that were to happen, which it did happen in the Marines, we handled it much differently. Like it was like, okay, like it was not uncommon for someone to be like, all right, ranks off, let's settle this. Like, all right, we're settling this. Like rank is like, I've seen it happen with captains and majors where it's like ranks off, we're gonna go settle this now. And we would, you know, it's like, all right, here are the boxing gloves.
Yeah,
we're all gonna watch. Something's gonna happen.
Somebody's getting their ass kicked.
If you know anybody came around asking about it, everybody in the platoon was like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. That never happened. What?
Wasn't even there.
Don't know what you're talking. We're all drinking. Doesn't sound like us.
No,
that does not sound like us at all.
We were at the grocery store.
I was at church. You know, so I think that's just the different mentality back to the esprit de corps that we had. Because I served with plenty of guys that I thought were just terrible human beings. You know, like that guy's a shitbag or a douchebag, or like I would not be friends with him outside of the Marine Corps at all. In fact, one of the greatest leaders I ever had, I hated as a human being. I thought he was a terrible human being, but to this day, he could call me right now and be like, grab your guns, we're going to go invade the gates of hell. And I'd be like, I'm right behind you. That was the type of leader.
I'm on my way.
I'm on my way. Like I know, like I trust you.
Yeah.
We would not go out and get beers at all. I would not hang out with that man. But I would follow him to the gates of hell.
Yeah.
I really would.
You have that trust for that leadership. That's what I think is important there from what you're saying. You know,
absolutely.
There's a lot of guys that I didn't like. I had both sides of the fence, you know, officers I didn't like, but I would follow them, or, you know, people I wouldn't follow and I like to drink beers with, you know, and I've seen that, and I've seen changes happen and stuff like that. But Ryan, you were going to say something a little bit earlier.
I was kind of interested because Joe kind of touched on him joining the military, and mine was probably not as adventurous as his story. The short version of mine is basically I went to college, found out they wanted me to pay for it, and I was like, fuck that. And I joined the Army, but I was curious because I don't think I've ever really heard what kind of led up to that. You know, what was Alex like before the military, and what got you involved?
You know, I was kind of a runt in high school a little bit. You know, I played football, but I wasn't a good football player. I did track, but I was a pole vaulter or whatever, and not really a good long distance runner or short distance, you know, but I was always part of some sort of team mentality. And, you know, when I started looking at the military, and, you know, you got to remember, I grew up in Connecticut, very liberal state. And, you know, when I told people I was actually, I looked at the Marines, looked at the Air Force, and the Army was the one that had like the metric of like, you can get promoted and here's your timeline and how much money you can make. And I was like, well, I still want to go to college, but I still want to join the military. I understand, you know, date of what do they call it? Entry date, you know, for pay is important. So I was like, oh, I'll do the reserve thing and figure out the active duty piece after college. And, you know, I went to basic training AIT, which would have been my first semester of college in Connecticut, and came back and was like doing the reserve thing. And I think the reason why I joined it was because I wanted to vault being a cop. You know, I was like, why would you not hire somebody that's previous military, and then furthermore, maybe an MP, you know, which now I think, you know, infantry probably holds maybe a little bit more weight or something in regards to that.
You do not want infantry guys being police officers. That is a bad idea.
But a lot of them do that. I know.
Yeah, it was one of those deals where I thought this will strengthen my resume and give me more of an opportunity, maybe a leg up. And you do get, I think, a certain amount of points extra if you're military when you're applying to be a police officer. But, you know, that was really my goal. I never really wanted to be active duty. I just wanted to be a reservist and do my part, because I didn't want to move around, right? And I say that, and I've moved literally 13 times. since I graduated college, or since I graduated high school. But, and that's, one of the reasons I got off AGR was I wanted to be stabilized in Conroe. But, I made that decision a long time ago, just that it was going to help me in my civilian career path. And oddly enough, it did, just not in the cop world,
No.
And I remember going to basic training and thinking, okay, well, after this, I'm going home. These people don't know where they're going. Ryan's going to Fort Polk, or remember drum was a thing and hood was a thing. Like, people were all like, oh, I don't know where I'm going to go. And I'm like, yeah, I don't like that idea. I like to know where I want to know that I'm going to go home and I'm going to go back and, see some of my friends again, and that'll be it. And, I'll start my life there. I had a little bit more choice, I would say, in what I did versus, I don't think it's a bad thing that people are constantly told where to go or what to do. Sometimes that works for people. It just didn't work for me. It was like, if I'm going to make mistakes, I'm going to choose where I want to go. I want to be the one to blame. I don't want to be stuck in, I don't know, Fort Sill, Oklahoma, or whatever. I'm not saying they're bad places, but you get what I'm saying. And that's why I was able to pick up and leave Connecticut after a year and move down in Texas. And I had that choice whereas, active duty, you don't, and that's it.
So when you got done with, all your training, did you immediately go to college, or did you do was that kind of what you wanted to do? Was like, I'm going to be, do the reserve thing, go to college, or, kind of what was that progression like?
Yeah. So I enlisted March 1st, 2005. So I had some time before I graduated high school, like 6 months, I was drilling, just a little peon, not knowing anything about the Army. So then I left to go to basic training. Ryan, I think we started July or August of 2005. And then I graduated December 15th or something like that. So it was about 6 months, maybe 19 weeks, whatever that math is in months. And, I had already applied to the college that I was going to go to. I just told them I wasn't going to start in the fall semester. I was going to start in the spring semester. And that's what I did. I think I actually might have applied. I had to reapply or something like that, redo an application while I was in basic training, just to let them know, hey, I'm still coming back in the springtime. So yeah, I literally, they shipped me back to Connecticut, went back home, lived with my parents, and started, I commuted to college, which was a 20-minute drive, and just kind of did that. And I was like, yeah, Connecticut's kind of a dump, but it was already kind of set up. The framework was there. And I was like, yeah, I really want to finish college. Cause in my mind, I knew me, if I put it on the back burner, I was not going to finish it. If I started it for 2 years and then went to the Army and then was like, oh, I'll do this later, I wouldn't, that the way I operate, I would not have finished it. So I did. Oddly enough, I started my master's at Texas State and I never finished it because I deployed. There's some goal I want to do now, but it's kind of one of those deals where, the framework was there. And it was funny because going to college, I was like, oh, I want to be an MP officer now. I never knew that I wanted to be an officer. And then it was, oh, I want to be an MP officer. And then it was, hey, you have an opportunity to fly. And I was like, yeah, I want to try that. Like this other job's cool, but flying sounds a lot more fun.
So you didn't join the Army and go to college thinking, my path is an officer. That just kind of evolved as you grew your career.
Yeah, it just kind of, it was the opportunity was presented to me, by just being in that environment. And, that time I told you about that Norwich lieutenant and how terrible he was. And I was like, why don't I was like, you can't, like, I'm an E2 and I wouldn't treat people this way. And you're that bad of a leader. I said, I can do your job. Maybe I was more arrogant back then as an 18, 19-year-old. Because Ryan remembers, I was a really, I was a 300 PT or blah, 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 all that stuff. But, I was like, you're a dirtbag. I'm not going to follow you. And I want to do your job. And so that's kind of how it evolved. I looked at poor leadership and I said, I can do it better. And hopefully I have to a certain degree. I mean, maybe there's people that argue against that, but, it's just one of those deals. And never would I thought I'd be flying 10 years of flying helicopters and now flying jets and airplanes. It's kind of like weird, like they still let me do this. This is a good idea.
Well, looking back on your career now, do you have any regrets or anything you wish you would have done different, or schooling you wish you would have gone to? I mean, it sounds like you enjoy doing the pilot side of things, but looking back, like I look back on my Marine Corps and I'm like, man, I really wish I would have done that one school or tried to do, maybe run an NDOC for, stay or something like anything. Do you have anything like that?
There is one thing, and it's all based on the opportunity, right? So in the reserves, I didn't get a lot of opportunity to do cool swoopy schools. Some of them I did. I went to Mountain Warfare School for the Army, not the Marines. I know they have their own. I went to both summer and winter, and that's its own story in itself of how I was able to get that slot. I did air assault. Obviously, went to flight school. I went to SEER school. But the one thing that I did want to do before I commissioned was I wanted to go to Ranger school, and a lot of that was not, to be a hard-nosed Ranger, go infantry, but it was to be able to complete something that, I'd be proud to wear the tab. I would never do the Ranger job, obviously, because I wasn't an infantry officer, but, I really wanted to go and push. I used to be very motivated to get these schools and be in shape and fitness. And furthermore, I knew in my early 20s, I was going to be in a lot better shape than at 34, but I could never get that slot because I was in an aviation unit and they didn't need Rangers and there was no justification for it, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I did want to go to Ranger school. I have a lot of respect for Rangers. And what we see actually in the reserves is there's a lot of people that are tabbed that come from the Ranger. You see the transition. I was a Ranger and now I'm a pilot, but you never see I was a pilot and I went to go be a Ranger. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so, we see a lot, there's long tab guys too, SF guys that come over and want to fly and have done it all. And I think it's super cool. But yeah, I did want to go to Ranger school. Now I want to go to instructor pilot school for the military to actually get the certification, teach people how to fly the airplane or the helicopter. That's something I want to do. But that's kind of down the road. I think some of the achievements that I want, looking back, it's the Ranger piece, but there would be no way that I can do it right now without putting a whole lot of time and effort into that, and with a less than 1% chance of even going. Who's going to look at a 35-year-old major that wants to go to Ranger school? It's just not. It's not feasible. But I think it's been roughly 16 and a half years now for me, which is interesting to say. I got 3.5 years left to only 20, which I won't see a retirement until 58. But I look at it, there's only certain benchmarks I want to do now that I need to look forward and not look back. And instructor pilot school, go to the jet course, and I want to be the detachment commander for the jet detachment that goes over to the Sinai, really. And that's really it. Maybe a company commander for the C-12. But, and so if I can achieve those couple things, I'd leave. I don't, with my career path, even being in the reserves, I got nothing more to prove anymore. And I think maybe I told Ryan that, a lot of the humility I have is because I've had a lot of great experiences in the Army Reserve specifically, that when people are like, oh, well, you're just a reservist. And I'm like, okay. I mean, how many times did you fly SEAL Team 1? Or like, did you, I forgot, were you in the other aircraft rescuing people in Hurricane Harvey? No, you weren't, so there's experiences that I have that maybe aren't directly related to combat, but that people look at Compo 2 and Compo 3 and look at it like, well, you're just the weekend warrior. And it's like, yeah, I got nothing more to prove, dude. What the reason I'm doing what I'm doing now is to benefit the unit and the benefit, the aviators beneath me. So my goals and my aspirations to check the block are different. They're like, well, if this opportunity comes up, that's great. But you got to remember, I have a civilian career path. So the Army to me is something I want to do. It's like your hobby, like you doing this podcast. So you commit to doing it every Saturday at this time because you enjoy doing it. When the Army becomes more cumbersome for me and not fun anymore, then that's when I'll step away. Does that make sense? Yeah. And looking back, I mean, there's probably, as a young lieutenant back when I saw him running and all that stuff, and Ryan fails to mention the time that he wrote me a ticket on my BMW for having a stupid license plate, but I'll never forget that.
You wrote him a ticket? I forgot about that.
I remember that.
So I ticket. Man, what kind of friend? You were that kind of MP, weren't you? Dick bag.
Okay, if you heard what he said, it wasn't a post policy. It was a fake. It was a real ticket from my ticket book for a fake violation. Because what did your license plate say? No kids, no wife. No wife. he had a BMW and his license plate said no wife. So I'm on patrol up by the airfield and I'm like, I'm gonna go see if this guy's car is over here. Fuck that guy.
Yeah. Yeah, that was, but back in my lieutenant years, I made a lot of mistakes or just poor leadership. that I grew from. And, you know, you can look back and be like, hey, I regret doing that to a certain degree, but I learned from it. Does that make sense? And I think me going to a different unit, you know, your legacy doesn't really follow you. You start fresh, you learn from those mistakes and things like that. You know, I didn't really care for Fort Hood. And I really despise Fort Hood. And we fly into Killeen all the time for the airlines. Like, I sometimes overnight there. And I still don't want to ever be there, but that's part of my job to do it. But, you know, I don't really have a whole lot of regrets. I just look at the Ranger School piece I did want to do, and I just didn't have the opportunity to do it. But most of the opportunities I did have, I tried to capitalize on, you know, with certain schooling or positions or whatever. So I think we can all relate to that to a certain degree. We all wanted to go and do something more. I think if you're a driven person and you want to be successful, you'll try and do as much as you can. You know, you shoot for the stars, which is a stupid cliche, but you think big and you'll get there, versus people who are just mediocre and just like, oh, this is cool, I'm just going to do this and that's it. You know, like, I'm not going to try harder than I need to. I'm just going to be lazy enough to get by. And those people, they'll be okay, but they're not going to be extremely successful. You know, you got to wake up and go to the grind. You know, you got to do what you're doing. And, you know, if you don't ask the questions like, how do I get to Ranger School? Like, I literally was like, how the fuck do I get a slot to Ranger School? And, you know, people were like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, well, thanks, but I'm going to call somebody else, you know? And so I don't know. I think, you know, I'm sitting at a good place, still work a lot, you know, even being 34, but we all do, right? But, you know, what's the ultimate goal is that, or I guess my perception is I live a pretty good life based on the decisions that I made, even if I missed an opportunity. Like, nobody asked me in an interview, like, did you go to Ranger School? No. Okay, you're not hired. You know, they don't care about that kind of stuff.
You're not a Ranger.
You're not a. I thought everybody went to Ranger School.
But
No,
but in all fairness, like, you wouldn't have necessarily been set up for any more success in that department had you stayed in MP, because I was in the MP Corps for 10 years and I knew two guys that went, and both of them failed out. One of them lost his map and the other one, I think, got peered out. But that was two guys in the whole MP Corps.
But I think everybody
that
has,
got a slot.
especially when you're talking military people. I mean, everybody has that thing that they wish they would have had the opportunity to have done.
Yeah.
Like, I would have loved to have gone to SEER school. I was not really allowed to go to SEER. There was no reason for, like, you going to Ranger School. They were not like, hey, we're sending lowly PFC private infantry guys to SEER school. Yeah. Like, there is no need for that. Like, so I wish I would have had the opportunity, but that just never came up.
Yeah.
SEER is one of those deals that, you know, I think it's coveted to a certain degree, but it's great training. Don't get me wrong. I'm sorry to, you know, rub in your face a little bit, I guess, but, you know, it sucks.
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah,
it does suck. Joe, I'm telling you, there's parts that really, it teaches you a lot about yourself more than anything. But, you know, you're right.
Well, I liked those types of training evolutions, though. I mean, I really, the best training evolutions I did were the ones where they just were like defense week. For us was like one of the most miserable training evolutions to do, but I always thoroughly enjoyed, because that was where, like, you were testing yourself. Like, you were out there and you were pushing yourself to your limits, and that's why I wanted to do like SEER.
Well, you know, and I don't know what position you're in now, but, you know, technically, if you wanted to go be a SEER instructor as a government contractor, you have to go through SEER in order to be an instructor there. So might be, I mean, I don't know what you're doing for a job now, but, you know, if that's something you want to go look at. Now, there are a very different breed of people that are SEER instructors. I can tell you that because I've hung around some of them, and, you know, it's something to experience. But, you know, it's funny you mentioned that, because it's like, there's a lot of Rangers that go to SEER, you know, and it's like, okay, so Rangers can go to SEER and I can go to SEER as a pilot, but I can't go to Ranger School. And, you know, and some of that too, I see some fidelity in it, because if you break your leg in Ranger School, then you can't really be a pilot, you know, or you get a twig in your eye or some shit and you can't see anymore with, you know, your vision. Like, I see the liability that the Army looks at for that. but I don't have to agree with it. I just, I'm like, well, I would still go tomorrow if you give me an opportunity. I would train up for it, but it's just not likely, and it's not going to be. And now I'm like, I'm old, my back's hurting me and some other stuff, and it's just not feasible. But the Ranger piece, I think there's a lot of camaraderie with the Rangers, like there are with the Marines, and to be able to check that block and say, I didn't get peered out, or I did crush the land nav course. Mountain Warfare School is very challenging in terms of the land nav, and there weren't really peer reviews, but just all the tests and stuff like that. And I would encourage people to try and go to that. It's very difficult school, very physically demanding, both winter and summer. So you don't see that badge a lot. I think now you do. There was some doctrine stuff. The badge wasn't authorized until like 2010 or something. And so I wear it now, and people are like, what is that? And then they find out, and like, oh, that's, you remember, Ryan, I showed you that video of when they did that stuff at Fort Hood of me doing the interview. There was, when that got posted on social media, somebody paused the video, zoomed in, and took a picture of that badge, and it was like, what is this? I remember seeing it in the comment, and they're like, then there was, of course, the trolls. They're like, oh, that's not authorized to be worn. And then somebody comes back and was like, yeah, it was authorized. And then, all the other nonsense with that.
Wait,
but
what happened? What is this?
So Alex has a really good habit of becoming the poster child for
Well, I mean, look at that face. I
for
mean,
whatever.
why
So
wouldn't
he
you?
is like Captain America. Okay. So because I remember when you were in school, he was on a billboard right off post, and I never noticed. And he was like, yeah, did you see that billboard? And then every time I left post, I was like, I fucking know that guy. And then earlier he sent me, not like a week or so ago, he sent me a video he did. They have something now called DVids, which I didn't know was a thing. But
I don't even know what that is.
I have a friend who is a staff sergeant combat photographer in the Army, and a lot of her stuff goes up there. And he sent me one from there, and I watched it. It is a really badass video, and he's in it. And I was looking at your chest, and I was like, man, I can't tell. I mean, it looks badass. It's like in the video, he's still a captain, but on his chest, you see stuff. And, in the military, if you see someone of really any rank with nothing, there's a certain level of, like you don't have a combat patch, you don't have any schools, you don't have anything. Like you learn how to tie your boots and then we'll talk. But to see someone like him, he's got all this shit on his chest. It's just like, when I was in Germany, the guy on this bracelet, he was a desk sergeant at the time, and he was fucking stacked. Combat patch, air assault, airborne, Ranger, almost everything. And people would come in to file a police report and see him and be like, I don't think I'm allowed to talk to you. So to see Alex in that video with all that shit on his chest, it's like, all right, well, this guy, he fucking knows something. But I wouldn't know that mountain badge if it was right in my face.
So you were getting critiqued on that? Is that what was happening?
Because it wasn't around before then.
Oh,
people weren't allowed to wear it.
The video was like basically a PAO, public affairs video of, hey, this is the reserves working with Fort Hood, active duty, blah, 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 doing some training exercises or something. And like, it was a focus on the Black Hawk and the capabilities and what it can do and blah, blah, blah. And so they had a very professional setup where they gave me like this little microphone, and, they were interviewing me, and they did all these cuts, which you can see, but you can see clearly on my chest, I had my aviator wings. I can't remember if I had my senior wings, but I don't think so. And then the air assault, and then the everything is subdued, right? Except for the ram's head, which the ram's head has gold horns. And so that's what's significant about it. It's the only badge I'm aware of that has some color to it on the subdued uniform. And so the one thing that I can respect about the Marines too, that I really like, is that they don't differentiate. I mean, I know that you guys have some badges on your chest or something, but it's not much, especially on your shoulders.
You don't have any of that shit. Like,
and I really like that, because here's why. Just like Ryan said, if I walk into a meeting and I've got my combat patch and I've got my badges and blah, 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 like, yeah, there's some fidelity to when I speak, right? There's somebody that's going to believe me. But when you see Marines walk in, you don't know where they've gone, what they've done, and yada, yada. They could be great, or they can be, dirtbags, but you don't know. But when they speak, you're not looking at their uniform to differentiate, am I going to believe you or not? You know, that's what I can appreciate about the Marines. We have a lot of guys that have a complex about not having a combat patch, you know, after being, you know, 10, 20 years at war. And I just tell them, like, hey man, like, it makes no difference. Like, you go in there and talk about flying, being a pilot, doesn't matter if you have a combat patch or not, in my opinion. But people do look at that, and that's one thing I don't like. They differentiate between the two. You know, my lieutenants never had combat patches, and they would look at me and be like, oh, you know, and I'm like, hey, listen, it's a, you know, there's some history behind it. Sure. There's a lot of history behind the shoulder sleeve insignia of former wartime service, or whatever the actual thing is, you know, but yeah, to get back to the original
combat patch.
Yeah, they paused the video because they didn't know what the badge was. And then, you know, this was posted on Facebook on like the U.S. Army Reserve website, a Facebook page or something like that. And they were like hundreds and hundreds of comments and thousands of likes or whatever, you know, I don't know. It was a really well made video, but you know, there was that, and nobody, I was kind of worried about getting flack for wearing it, but because you have to have orders, and I do have the orders, and you know, but it's a rare thing, because you know, you never want to have something on your uniform you're not authorized to wear, or people get curious about it and they look into it. So it was one of those deals.
Stolen valor.
No.
Yeah, PX badges or whatever. You know, look, funny,
oh, keep going.
Well, that same time that we were out doing that stuff in 2018, I wanted to tell you, Joe, it's funny because you mentioned, you know, showering in the field and all that stuff. And one of the pilots bumped into like a lieutenant. It was actually a female lieutenant in the armor division for tanks. And I forget how, he's like, hey, you know, they coordinated unit to unit and said, hey, we're going to go fly the helicopters out to the range when they go shoot. So we get to see the tank shoot. And, you know, they get to come out and see the helicopter or whatever. So it was like mutually beneficial. So they had been out in the field for like 2 to 3 weeks or something like that. And they're doing their tank gunnery. We go fly 3 Hawks out there, and we land on the west side of the red line and then cross the road into the red line where they were going to shoot. And they had these like Bradleys out there and the M1s. And, you know, it had rained the night previous and it was kind of muddy or whatever, going back to your boot story. And we walk over there, and they're so proud of their tank. It's super cool. Now, I drove a Bradley actually when I was deployed. I got an opportunity to do one. So for me, I was like, okay, cool. I get to see it again. And I'm looking around. The guys are like ragged the fuck out, smoking cigarettes, look like they've been up, you know, 30 hours and all this other shit. I'm like, yeah, come on, climb on in and, you know, check out the tank. And I was like, okay, cool. And I'm looking around, and I don't see tents anywhere. And this is the Army. And I'm looking around, and I'm like, there's like one tent, you know, for like ops or something. I said, where the fuck do you guys sleep? And they go, oh no, we sleep on top of the tank. And I said, what? And they go, oh yeah. And if it rains, sometimes we might sleep underneath it or inside of it. I'm like, okay. And they're like, where do you sleep? And I said, I'm at the Courtyard Marriott. I got my own room with a kitchen. And I said, and Carl over here is slumming it because he's at, you know, the Crown Plaza and doesn't have a kitchen. Like, that's roughing it for us. We're like, we hate you, you know, blah, blah, blah. Like,
Sons of bitches.
And I was like, yeah, I got cable and Wi-Fi, and, you know, I made breakfast this morning. You know?
Where do you sleep?
I was talking to the Air Force guys when I was at Camp Lachute. So I was in, and I was at Chow one day, and there was these dudes in the tiger stripe uniforms, and they were like, oh, there's the Air Force. We just got talking to these guys, and we were talking to them, and they're like, is this how you Marines live all the time? And I'm like, yeah, our barracks are like right there. And they're like, how many, like, I'm like, I can't believe that. Like, it's such a small room to have. You know, how do you fit all your stuff in there? I was like, well, you know, we have closets in there, and each of us, like, each of you, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, there's 3 guys in a room in one bathroom. They're like, oh, thank God we get paid to come here and do this. They get like extra pay to come on the Marine Corps base. And I'm like, you're a son of a bitch. I fucking hate you. Like, this is how I have to. This is nice for me, comparatively speaking.
Yeah, substandard living.
Yeah, substandard living. That's what they got. I was like, you.
Oh, were you ever down in Al Jaber in Kuwait?
Me? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the base that's where we flew in and out of in Iraq.
Dude,
that was a nice fucking base.
Dude, I had to fly some colonel or something there one day. And I remember I was flying with this guy. He's like, yeah, we're gonna go down to Al Jaber today. I was like, where? Like I knew the land of Kuwait. And I'm like, I've never heard of that. He's like, yeah, we're gonna go fly so-and-so down there. I was like, oh, okay, whatever we're gonna do, you know. And we
That's the
go
base
to
just down the
land
road from the airport, right? Like
from
right
Kuwait
there.
International. It's like
Yeah.
very south. And, you know, you go to Ali Salim, or, you know, you go to with Arif John, you know, those Air Force bases, and you're like, okay, they're kind of nice. Udari's a dump, obviously. And so I had never been to El Jaber, but the one time I went to El Jaber, I was like, this is a fucking third world country down here. This is like off. And I saw Marines living there, and I'm like, this is where they fucking live? And like, the guy's phone is, yeah, oh yeah, we come down here all the time. We fly down here, you know. And I'm like, there was like HESCO barriers and just dust, and like it looked miserable, man. I felt for you guys. I was like, holy shit. Like,
that's so nice. I can't even tell you. That's like, no, the base I was at Kuwait was we flew into Kuwait International, and we took like a 10 or 15-minute drive, and there was a base. They had like a McDonald's, a Subway, there was a Domino's. They had a really nice KBR Chow Hall. I don't know what the name of the base was.
They closed a lot of them down. I think there was like Victory, Camp Freedom. But I remember El Jaber was really far south. And I was like it was in the middle of fucking nowhere. Now, granted, I didn't get out of the aircraft and go walk around, so I don't know what they had for amenities, but I just saw it. Like, I remember all the dust. Obviously, Kuwait's dusty anyway, but, you know, I was like, this is excessive.
Yeah, they had like the metal SWA huts is what we call them, like just their metal.
Oh yeah, it was just. Yeah. I was like,
I don't know what you're talking about. That shit was nice because they had like they had a McDonald's on there, bro. Like that was good. Like we're like yes, because that's where we were flying. So when we landed off the civilian aircraft to go transfer onto the military flight into Iraq, that's where we flew out of.
Usually it was out of like we did it out of Udari. Udari was like the jump point on the south border of Iraq, from Udari to like Taji or wherever. And so that's where they flew. There was mostly a heliport there. I don't think they ever landed airplanes at Udari. Udari was kind of barren and distant and shitty too. I remember Al Jaber being, man, I was like, because that's where they kept the Marines. And I was like, oh, this is rough.
Yeah, this
is rough.
Yeah, Marine. Yeah, we don't have nice shit. Like I'll never forget the first time when I was training for like night vision. So I was in 2000. So I did all my training in 2007, dropped to the fleet end of 2007. We still had 7 Bravos back then. Like the 7 Bravo NVGs, which were the 2, they had the 2 eyes with the one nozzle coming out of it. That's I deployed to Iraq in 2008 with iron sights still at that point. We still had iron sights. Like ACOGs were like new to us. We came home from that deployment and got ACOGs, and they were like, here's some hand-me-down ACOGs that have like duct tape on them and shit. We're like, this is the nicest shit ever.
That's crazy, man. Because we had, so if you were, I think, I want to say very few people had ACOGs deploying, but pretty much everybody had a 68, a red dot. So there was no magnification, but it's like, why do we get that stuff and you guys get the shit?
Dude, I was humping a saw with iron sights, bro.
It's like the most I pulled my trigger down range was when we went to Butler Range and we fired off pretty much every weapon system we had to make sure it still worked.
Nope, my entire platoon, I think, had the only people who had ACOGs were the corpsmen, the squad leaders, and the platoon sergeant, platoon commander. Everybody else had iron sights.
That's crazy.
If I recall correctly.
I just feel like in that scenario, you guys kind of needed it more.
I remember seeing some Army guys, route clearance guys came through, and they had like ACOGs on their saws and EOTechs and shit. We're all like, oh, this is badass shit. And they're like, yeah, dude, you don't have this? We're like, no. Here's my charging handle. That's what our green gear was like from Vietnam.
Yeah.
Like our green gear was straight up. It was old as shit.
We had when I deployed, we got IOTVs, And I thought that was awesome. And then when I got to Fort Hood, they were talking about plate carriers. And I was like, what's that? Now I go on all these hikes with irreverent warriors and everybody has a plate carrier. And I'm like, that would have been kind of cool.
Yeah, we got plate carrier. I got a plate carrier in Afghanistan.
So much less stuff.
Yeah.
I
didn't get a plate
range of
carrier
motion
until I landed in country in Afghanistan. Like the unit that was there was like, oh, by the way, you don't have to wear that old shitty thing. Here you go.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is nice. I don't care that it's used. It's still fucking nice.
Yeah. So
yeah, we
Alex,
plate carriers.
what's that?
We have plate carriers for aviators.
Lucky bastards.
Yeah, but
Well, we're not going to fit in the aircraft with that big shit, the IOTV, you know?
Well, plus
I could barely fit through a door in Iraq with that shit.
You deployed after I got to Fort Hood, right? Because you went to Kuwait.
Yeah, it was 2014. It was like June of 2014.
Yeah. So I went in 2007. I feel like the IOTV was a good idea, Ferry, that just fucking crashed and caught fire.
Like shoulder pads, right?
It's got the thing. Pull it here and it falls apart.
Yeah,
that thing we never used.
Yeah, so that if you get hit, they can.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, oh, we'll take it off real.
Of it. Yeah.
It was fucking terrible. It was the worst. I think they had them out. They used them for about a year or two. And then the plate carriers came out.
I remember having to try and jump over a wall with that thing on in Iraq, being like, I can't get my fucking arms above my head. This is like someone had to get on all fours, and guys were literally stepping on him as a ladder to like help boost themselves up. I'm like, but how are we supposed to be an assault force if this is how we're moving around the city?
But when I was at Fort Polk and we were training up from CIF, I was issued an IBA, and I'll tell you this right now, that IOTV was a huge upgrade from the IBA. Because the IBA, you could not move. It was terrible. The IOTV was much better than the IBA. Yeah, but still, I'm a little jealous. Plate carriers
were nice. That's what I got to wear.
I'll never forget. He's the one I told you the story about. So Alex, Joe had asked me, I think it was on an episode, about why would anyone pay for a steak? And it's when you got back from Kuwait. You had called me and you were like, hey, I'm back. I don't have my car up here. Come pick me up. So I was like, all right. And the bridge was out to get to North Fort Hood. So I had to go around. So I feel like it took me about an hour to get up there. I picked him up, and then we went by the store so you could get a cell phone. Then we went out to eat. And Alex is like, hey, you picked me up. I haven't seen you in forever. I just got back from deployment. I'm buying your meal. And I was like, what's the most expensive steak that you have? I want that one.
It was well worth it.
It was delicious. It was worth it. I remember you talking to the phone lady. That was the funniest shit, because I still think about this every time I get a new phone, which is like once every 4 years. And he's like, I would like to buy an iPhone. And she's like, all right, we have plans where you can pay $25 a month, $35 a month. He's like, no, I just want to buy a new phone. And she's like, well, it doesn't really work like that. You have to like get it. And then if you get a $50 a month plan, we put an extra $35 a month on it for the phone. And he's like, no, I understand what you're saying. Like, I'm not confused about the payment options. I just want to swipe my card and own the phone. And the girl's like, I don't think we can do that. It was the funniest shit. He's like, I just like, if the phone costs $1,000, I would like to just pay you $1,000 and then have the phone. And I mean, he was getting a plan. He had been out of the country. So he was like, I'm signing up for phone service, but I don't want to pay monthly for the phone. And the girl just couldn't wrap her head around it.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm not making a payment plan. Because, you know, the thing was, I had experienced, when you make a payment on the phone like that, you'll never pay it off. It's not like a car, loan. And so the iPhone for life crap, I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm just paying for a phone and that's it. And you end up saving. So that's, I mean, some people can't do that. At that point I could, obviously, if, when you come back from deployment, you have a good amount of money. And I'm like, I'm not doing this. I was homeless at that point. I had no place to live when I came back. I don't know if you remember that. They closed out my apartment and all that stuff. I literally was coming home to nothing. So it's like, you got money, buy phone. So still have that phone, Ryan. I still have it.
She was so confused.
I tried to do that at Verizon when I
What
got
do you
this. Was
mean?
my first phone in like 3 or 4 years, and I was like, "Can I just buy this?" And the guy's like, "No, nobody does that anymore." I was like, "At all?" He's like, "Yeah." I mean, like, you can go try.
I think though, honestly, I think the best option for military, which I learned about this in 2010, but Russell with Irreverent Warriors, I guess, just learned about it. But Apple has a military program, and you can buy an unlocked iPhone from them if you're a veteran for a pretty fair discount. So if anybody's a veteran that wants to get, buy the phone outright, that's one of the best ways to do it if you're not one of those anti-Apple people, because you get a huge discount, you own the phone outright, and then you can just pick whatever service you want and sign up.
I hate Apple, so no, thank you.
Okay.
Not an Apple person.
We got one.
Sorry.
It's a one guy.
Yeah, I'm the one.
So
The punk
Alex,
rocker and me just buck against the system.
That's all right. That's fair. I'm kind of against all of them at this point, but so Alex, I know right now, and I don't know if you can talk about the name of the company or whatever, but you work a full-time job. And I do really like that we kind of talked about that dynamic, because we haven't had reservists or National Guardsmen on here. So just that, kind of juggling two jobs and how challenging it can be. But basically you're full-time in your position in the civilian world now. Reservist is a little bit more of the, like you said, it's kind of like a hobby, something you do that you enjoy. But what I find really interesting about that is it's like in your civilian side, you're kind of starting at the bottom, whereas in your military side, you're working your way towards the top. So it's like you have to be someone with a good student mentality on one end, and at the same time willing to step up and be in charge on the other end. So have you found any new challenges in that dynamic, or what's that been like for you?
Well, I think when it comes down to, when you talk about the airlines in terms of to get qualified to be in the front of that aircraft and fly it, you have to meet certain criteria. And the U.S. airlines they have a more strict requirement to be a pilot for the U.S. airlines, right? You have to have 1,500 hours of flight time, an airline transport pilot license, all sort kind of stuff. So once you get to that level, I work with a lot of professionals, and really we go in and we do a job, we're moving people from point A to point B. And I'm not saying that derogatory, like we do a lot more than that. We flew a deceased woman one time to Memphis, Tennessee. She was actually in the cargo compartment, and we do that. There's dogs we transport in the cargo compartment. There's things like we reunite people. I think, one time we got a letter over the cockpit door from a lady. She was on the way to see her son. We were the first flight out, and he had a brain aneurysm and was in a coma. And he didn't have much time basically in the thing. So we connected him there. But, in this job, yes, we're starting at the bottom in terms of the smaller jets, so to speak, even though it's a 76 passenger jet. Before you move up to, 130, 200 people jets, that's kind of a different level of, international flying overseas and things of that nature. I think one benefits to the other because there's a lot of automation in the jet that I fly. And when I say automation, I mean, literally it'll do next to everything except for takeoff and land. Right. Whereas me flying the King Air from the military, like that's a very involved aircraft to fly compared to the jet and the automation. So, one helps me with the other. We're just flying a different customer. We're flying, 1 stars and 4 stars in the King Air versus, or maybe some swoopy dudes, or some equipment to go somewhere, versus flying the jet, which is there's a lot less planning involved. Jet, everything's kind of catered to us as an airline pilot. It's just a matter of the pay. Like, what do I get paid now versus what am I going to get paid in 10 years? And that was the benefit analysis I did to get out of the Army, because even as an 04, 05, maybe ever down the road in 06, I knew I was going to cap out at a certain, you can predict it based on pay charts. Whereas when I looked at the pay charts for the airlines, I was going to be making 60% less. I took a 60% pay cut to go to the airlines than what I was making as a captain in the Army, to then top out, at a very, very healthy and affordable living expense, but it does take a lifetime to get there, right? You know, you got to imagine I've been in the aviation world now for over 10 years. I flew, helicopter almost 10 years, and I've been flying since 2007. And, some of these guys, I mean, they only work 14 days a month, or, they're on call for 14 days a month, and they don't get called, and they're sitting at home making really good money. So that was the cost benefit analysis for me, to leave the military, and not work, 5 days a week, 9 to 5, and PT, and also I'm going TDY and doing assignments I don't want to do, and, moving all over. So I haven't seen any really challenges with going to the airline specifically, because I think a lot of people respect the fact that I've been a military pilot, and even if they've never been in the military, we still have a good relationship when we climb in the cockpit together. And they may not know my background, they don't have to know my background, they just have to know that I can operate the aircraft safely and fly, and that's what it is. And the unique thing about it's not really a challenge, but being the pilot in command in the Black Hawk, I was the one in charge, right? But now I'm a first officer at an airline, so the captain's in charge, right? So we had to collectively make decisions together, but he's the final authority. So I've been in that position, just in a different aircraft, in a different environment, so I can kind of understand that. And I sit there and phrase things a certain way, like, hey, I recommend this, or maybe we should do this, or those kind of challenges, a little bit more. They're not challenges, they're like it's delivery method. Versus in the aircraft, there's only one time I've ever flown the Black Hawk, and I've had to look at the guy next to me and say, sit on your fucking hands and we're done here. There's only one time I ever had to do that. And thankfully, right? Because you don't want to fly with somebody that's going to be combative or hostile in the cockpit. So, there's that kind of the military differences. The regiment's there, the SOPs are there to be followed. So it's a very linear transition. It's just that flying for the airlines is a lot easier. There's not as much flight planning. You don't really you're not as involved with a flight as with a military flight, as you can imagine. So it's a lot easier. I show up to the gate, scan in, do the pre-flight, program the computer, and get say one black coffee, one water, please, and wait. And that's wait for them to board and finish.
I feel like there is a certain like the dynamic between two pilots. It's like you wouldn't be boarding this aircraft if you didn't know how to fly it. Like we're not teaching you how to do it. You're already up to speed on all that. So it's like there's not a lot of testosterone or bumping shoulders like, no, I'm in charge, sit down and shut up. Because it's like, well, we both know how to fly it, and one of us plays one role and one of us plays the other role.
Yeah, and that kind of culture might be different. Years and years ago, 30 years ago, it might have been different. I don't know. I can't really speak to that, but what I can say is, when I get up there in the cockpit, like, I know the guy next to me is going to be just as qualified, obviously more qualified in flying because he's the captain, got more time. And they look at me likewise. Like, the guys sitting next to me has been trained. We're all trained to a certain standard to do things a certain way. We're not monkeys moving levers and pushing buttons, but we're trained to work together no matter who you are, no matter where your background is, what demographic you are. We all do the exact same job. We understand each other's jobs, and that's it. I've climbed in the cockpit with guys that were 50-something years old and, didn't talk much. They just want to sit there and, do their job and do some paperwork or whatever, monitor the flight. But then I've made some really good friends, so to speak, in the aircraft, and just really bond well together. I flew with a guy who flew for Air China for 29 years. He flew Airbus A330, Boeing 777. He retired out of there, I think, and moved to the United States. And now he's flying this jet. And I was like, you have all this experience. And it was somewhat of a language, not barrier, but, he had an accent. And it's about bridging that gap and talking to somebody and seeing, hey, where's the common ground aside from flying? And that's really what it's about. You work together and that's it. I mean, it goes back to how you deal with people. That's where the military and my leadership, I guess, can kind of coincide with that. Is I can talk to anybody. You put me behind the door with somebody for 3 hours, you best believe I'm going to be trying to find out something. I don't want to sit there in a boring aircraft for 3 hours on autopilot, like doing nothing. It gets boring to a certain point.
Yeah. So all right. I have to ask this question of a pilot. So when you are flying, like I know autopilot is very heavy, right? Like nowadays with all the technology, it's as you said earlier, pretty much, takeoff, landing in some planes is all really you need to do, and then autopilot takes over. What on those long flights, the hell do you guys do up there if autopilot's engaged on like a 7-hour flight? Like
rock, paper, scissors.
Like what are you guys like? I gotta imagine someone's probably paying attention to like instrument panels and stuff, but for the most part, I feel like you guys are just like, what do you do on those long flights?
So that's a good question. I had my longest flight that I ever did was from Dallas to Canada. It was 4 hours and 20 minutes from pushback to, from door closed to door open, right? And so there's a lot of planning that is already done for you, but you have to make sure that the aircraft's ready to get in the air, the fuel's right, the weight's right, the performance numbers are right. You coordinate with that. And then once you get in the air and you're at a certain altitude, you're looking at the performance of the aircraft. Like, okay, at this altitude, we're burning this much fuel, but if we go down lower, we can go there faster, but we might burn more fuel. Or, what's involved with the flight? It's efficiency of getting there. We're not really trying to save the company money, but we're trying to save the company money in terms of fuel. But also, like, you might take off with so much fuel, you can't land at that weight. You have to burn X amount of fuel because you'll have an overweight landing, which could cause problems with structural things and things like that. So I think it was that flight that we were like kind of close, but we made it with landing weight with fuel. So there's a lot of analysis of the flight. Like once you get up there, the autopilot's on, you're monitoring the systems, you're making sure things are going. And for the most part, it's fairly easy. Yeah, we'll sit there and we'll talk to each other about stuff like, oh, hey, how long have you been with the company? Or do you have any kids and things of that nature? Or, hey, what approach do you think we're going to do in Canada? Hey, once we land in Canada and we get off the runway, where are we going? Like, oh, we're going to go down this way and take a right here and left and blah, 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 into the gate. And so we started talking about that kind of stuff. Hey, did you fill out your customs forms? Yes. Or do you have customs forms? Things of that nature. So they're, 4 hours and 20 minutes. Yeah, you're not going to be talking about flying the whole time, or you're not going to be like staring at a screen like a Jamoke or whatever. But yeah, it does get boring. These long cross country or over the pond flights in the 777, I haven't been a part of, but I've my friends' dads and stuff, and that's a whole nother level. I mean, they have multiple pilots on that airplane to let the captain go rest. He gets to go take a nap, for these 18-hour flights, because you can't expect the same cognizant level of flying ability at the 18th hour when you're in a critical mode to land the aircraft with 200 people. So,
you guys aren't like listening to like podcasts or like bringing an iPad and like I was like, oh, I really want to see this movie while we're flying, like just putting it on in the background.
Joe, I will tell you that that's not authorized to be done. That's all.
Good answer. I like it.
That is the most officer answer.
That is, yeah.
Yeah. The
well played, sir.
Yeah, they've got, and Ryan brought this up, we were talking about it the other day. Yeah, they have in-flight entertainment for the passengers in the back, and where you can listen to podcasts and movies and things like that. That's what you would expect for some long haul flights. So that's why I pimped him and said, hey, this may be something you might want to look into, put the podcast on the flight, because, and right, stop me, Ryan, if you told him this, but, a lot of people climb on a flight, especially post-pandemic, whatever we want to say, they haven't traveled in a while, they may bring their headset, or we might have headsets available on the flight, and they put on the in-flight entertainment. You're stuck in that seat for 3 hours. What are you going to do? You're going to, look at the entertainment and do something, especially if you're not sitting next to somebody So it might capture an audience that is, for lack of a better term, stuck on an airplane to captivate their attention and get them to get your message out there, so to speak. So, but the in-flight, to be honest with you, the in-flight Wi-Fi that we have on the aircraft I fly now, more recently got it in the cockpit. It's very regimented. You can't just connect and watch Netflix, right? It's very, I guess, IP address driven or whatever. So we can get company data, more importantly, weather data that's live in the cockpit, which is better than the radar sometimes, and to make analysis of weather stuff. Because clear blue day, it's gonna be a great flight, but pop-up thunderstorms in Dallas or down in Florida, yeah, you got to pick your way through that stuff and make the best decision based on fuel. So there's some of that we talk about in the cockpit as well.
The last time I flew into Dallas Fort Worth, there was like a tornado. There was a bad storm forming, and my plane was lucky enough to like just be on the edge of it where we could land. We were doing a huge company function for the company I worked for, coming from all over the country for this event. And like my plane from Denver was like one of the first ones to land, and everybody else got delayed. They were just circling the airport because they couldn't land. But that was a bad thunderstorm that came in. I was surprised they let us land. It was nasty.
They plan for that. There's some fuel planning requirements and times and all that stuff to get in there. But some people, I've gotten questions before like, oh, can't you fly around it, or can't you like skirt through it or something like that? And I'm like, look, if you haven't been flying for years, like I have, I understand that you may not grasp everything that goes into this job. But I can tell you this, flying into a thunderstorm is about the dumbest thing you can do in the entire world. Like it is, I've been in some pretty heavy turbulence before. Thunderstorms are not something to play around with. I mean, it's so bad. It's never something I want to go into, to be honest with you. They're just very dangerous. I don't think people realize the level of danger. I mean, you might be like, oh, I got to get there. I got an important meeting. And the other 70 people are just like, yeah, I don't care. I just want to get there safely. So you want
That's what I care about when I fly. Is like, I don't give a shit what time we land, as long as we land. Better late than never is my theory. Get us there safe. That's all I care about.
Yeah, you might have delays or get rebooked on a flight or whatever, but like you got there safely. That's what's really important. Nobody's gonna sacrifice 76 lives to punch through a thunderstorm to get there 5 minutes early. I mean, that's just, it's unreasonable. And it's just, some people just don't understand the job. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
I don't understand people who are like that though. Like I was on a flight where the pilots came over, like we had all sat in the plane before we pushed back. And the pilots came on and they said, hey, there's something wrong mechanically with this plane. We can't take off. So we're going to deboard and go to another plane. Luckily, there's one. It's just at this gate. We all are going to go down there. So we go down there and we're waiting to get on the plane. They're getting it ready. And there's this dude behind my wife and I who is losing his shit that he had to get off the plane. He's now delayed. He's losing his mind about it. I'm like, I turn around, I'm like, dude, they're doing their jobs. Chill the fuck out. Like, we're going to get there safely. And he's just, I don't get people like that. Like, they're doing their jobs. Just let them do their jobs.
I got in trouble going back from leave to Germany because there was a storm or something, so we couldn't take off. So they put us up in a hotel room, and I called my chain of command and said, hey, I'm going to be 1 day late. And they were like, Smelts got drunk and missed his flight. And I was like, why is that what happened? Like the plane, you can look up the flight number and see that it got grounded. Like what?
The only time I've ever been pissed off at pilots for making that decision was when the volcano in Iceland was going off. I was trying to come home from Afghanistan. Like, yep, we might not be going home. And then people started going, oh yeah, we might be, going back into, like, because we were at Leatherneck at that point, waiting to fly to Uzbekistan to fly home. And they were like, yeah, there are no flights coming over because of this volcano thing going off in Iceland or Greenland or something. And we were like, when they started walking around, I was like, yeah, we're going to fly back down in the Southern Helmand now. And we're like, no, someone tell these pilots we're trying to go the fuck home.
That's I'm sure they understand that too.
Yeah, no, that was the only time I was ever like, okay.
That's a really good question though, because I mean, coming from a passenger perspective, it's always like I think Louis C.K. talks about it. They're flying through turbulence and they're like, the next few minutes are going to be a little bumpy. He's like, can't we try that air over there?
Can we move that way?
Can we just take a different lane?
I mean, I hate flying through. I used to fly all the time for work, and I mean, I would go to DIA on Monday morning. I'd fly to somewhere in the country and fly back that Friday, and I did that for about 6 months. That was awful. But I hate, like, I've had a lot of great flights, but I fucking hate turbulence. I just hate,
because you're not in control.
Well, yeah, because I'm not, and I'm also a big dude. I'm also like me bouncing around that, and I used to fly business class, so I mean, I had the extra room. I still fucking hate it. I still hate it. I hate turbulence. I'm bouncing around. I'm like, can't we just like go up or down or to the left? Or look, come on, guys, find me some good air. I'm trying to sleep back here.
Turbulence puts me to, not in the cockpit, I should preface this, but turbulence when I'm riding as a passenger puts me to sleep. It's like being rocked around, and I'm like, like I don't get nervous, nothing, and yeah, we do try and find good air, but at certain points, you just can't. There's
nowhere
nothing
to go.
you can do. Yeah. There's nowhere to go.
When there's turbulence, I'm sitting there just like, I'm the guy with the eyes closed, like, really? Come on. Like I'm just breathing at that point.
I've flown so much in the Army that it got to the point where, especially if it was a short flight, I'd get on the plane and I'd start to pass out. I'd fall asleep and I'd wake up when we were landing. I'm like, oh shit, I
took a lot of Benadryl and NyQuil when we left after having 2 beers from Ramstein.
Oh yeah, that long flight. You just wake up in another country.
Yeah. They had, since I was the loading party on that flight, they had us sitting in first class. I was one of those two level planes. So like my ass was stretched out. They gave me a hot towel too. I was like, was this fancy? The one time I got bumped up to first class because of my membership miles was the time where my appendix bursted when I was in Atlanta for a meeting. Lord. And they were like, yeah, you can't fly home. And then when I was allowed to fly home, they bumped me back up to first class, and I couldn't enjoy first class fully. Like I couldn't get my free cocktails because I was on medication. And they were like, so I was like, God damn it. First class is fancy as fuck though. I love it.
I've never flown first class.
I've flown first class a handful of times. It's very nice. I've told my wife when we go to Italy in 2 years for our 10-year anniversary, I was like, we are flying first class. I was like, I'm going to pay the extra money to fly first class.
So it's worth it on the long flights. It really is.
It really is truly. Like I've been on those international coach a few times. Like when I flew to London, I was back by the bathroom on that flight. That was fucking miserable.
So Alex, you fly for the airline now. I know you said like 76 passenger. You're nearing your 20 years in the Army, but what do you see yourself doing long term? Are you gonna stay in the air, or do you have other plans?
Yeah, so I plan on hopefully getting picked up for a major airline, flying a bigger airplane, and making more money, right? That's the ultimate goal. Better treatment by a bigger company, like United or Delta or something like that, maybe American proper. But that really is a means to really down the road, me and my girlfriend want to invest in some real estate and really kind of get into the real estate market, more like multifamily homes or single family buy and hold, not necessarily flipping like you see on HGTV. But we really like where I live now, currently in the Conroe area, and we both enjoy flying. So flying, it's great. It's like life's a vacation. We go fly to different locations for our job, then we come home and we get on a boat in the lake, and it's kind of nice. So I do want to stay. I'll be continuing to fly for the airlines, hopefully throughout the rest of my career. And I'll just have to assess at 20 years what the military really, is it going to be worth it, for me to continue to serve after saying, doing everything that I have done already. I don't want to really fly any more on my days off than I need to, because right now I don't have days off. It's really not a thing too much. So, with the airline schedule, generally 14 days off, when you're working, 3-4 day trips here and there. I want to enjoy the time off I have potentially with a future family, rather than continue to serve in the reserves and doing that piece. Like I said, I have nothing to prove. After 20 years, we'll see. We'll
do you one day want to fly like international? Like you said, bigger. So I'm assuming you want to do like more international stuff.
Yeah, I want to do the long hauls, to China or London on the 777 or 787, but to get to that level, those guys that are guys and gals that are sitting in the cockpits up there, that you're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of experience that they have to fly in those airplanes. You don't just walk out of flight school and jump into a 777 and, go fly for United over to Guam. It's not a thing. So, and they get compensated very healthy for that kind of experience. And that's what it is.
And they also got to go hang out in fucking exotic places for a couple of days. That's got to be pretty awesome.
Yeah. You have a 30, 40-hour layover in Japan or something. I mean, whatever, Narita. But, those are the different types of experience that everybody thinks like, oh, that's the life of being an airline pilot. Like, yeah, well, they don't remember the times, they don't think about the times that you fly to McAllen, Texas and have a 12-hour turnaround, and you have to get like 8 hours of sleep, or all that kind of stuff. We don't have meals on our flights, those kind of flying 5 flights a day can get cumbersome. The goal is to do one long flight per day and be done with it and get paid really healthy. But, it's not an overnight deal. I mean, it's a long, arduous process of years and years and years in the making. So, and right now we're seeing a big disparity. There's not a whole lot of pilots that are coming out of, being produced. We're going to have a pilot shortage, and, that kind of industry is going to pick up, I believe. And because more people are wanting to get out and go fly, like you want to go to Italy with your wife, and, there has to be a pilot to fly. If that pilot calls in sick because they ate, something, got a stomach bug, and there has to be a pilot behind them to fly that flight. And right now we're getting to that point where there's just really not enough. And so,
I think there's labor shortages across the board right now.
Yeah, well, and I can respect that. I guess my point with that is that you have to go, it takes years to train to even get to the seat that I'm sitting in. Right. So like, if you have a son and he wants to go be a pilot, it might take him 3 to 4 years, if not more, to get to a regional airline for the airlines. There's other jobs out there. There's corporate, there's life flight, there's other things. But in terms of the airline industry, there's lots of jobs for pilots. It's just not, it's kind of like going to college. You have to wait 4 years before you can be eligible to do something. And so the flash to bang, whereas you can train an Army pilot to do an Army job in a year, right? And then expect them to go do that job. Whereas at the airlines, it's a little bit different. There's a little bit more qualifications involved in tests and flight hours and something like that. So, it's just different. I'm kind of stuck in my industry, if you want to say. I hate to say it that way, but like, what if I lost my medical tomorrow? I don't know what I would do for a job. I mean, all my experience is flying, period. So what good am I to go into like the computer IT world? None. You know what I mean? I have a very specific technical skill that doesn't translate anywhere else, so something to think about, because you commit to that journey in that industry for the rest of your life. And I get into a car accident tomorrow and I lose my leg, God forbid, I'm done, So it's something to think about.
Very well. It is, it's getting almost time. Is there any,
Yep.
I mean, I'm good. I thought, Alex, that was a great conversation.
Yeah, I enjoyed being here.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on. I've learned a lot. I didn't know that you could kind of go into the Army open like that and start with wanting one thing and move kind of into another. So that was pretty interesting to hear about.
I appreciate you taking all this time out, man. We never expect somebody to stay for the whole 4 hours, but you made it happen. I thank you for that.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, it's honestly an honor to be on a podcast. I think it's really cool. I think it's very neat to come over almost 16 years from knowing you as well. And that wasn't a determining factor for being 4 years. I mean, we can sit down, we can have a discussion for hours and hours and hours, the three of us, which we probably will next time I'm in Raleigh, but whenever that is. So it's just
if you ever find yourself flying into RDU, hit us up.
Yeah.
Buy you a beer.
Ryan knows I will.
Yeah.
There you go.
No doubt.
I live 10 minutes from RDU.
Yeah.
Not even.
Same. Cool, man.
Well, good deal.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, pending any further questions.
Yeah, we would love to have you back on.
Yeah,
there's a lot more. I wanted to try and get into the Southwest stuff that was been going on lately. Get your thoughts on that. We kind of ran out of time. It was a great conversation.
Yeah, it's a crazy time. There's a lot to talk about, especially with the aviation industry and the military, as you can imagine. So with everything going on. So, but I'm gonna get Jet in here because I actually got an appointment at like 2:30 Central Standard Time. So I need to. It's only 8 minutes away, but I need to get going to that. And then we got to pack up, and we're driving down to Houston another 3.5 hours with her stuff because she's moving in. So, it's a soft move day. So, but we still got a long day ahead of us. I anticipated being in Houston today, or Conroe really, but getting done so late last night, there was no way it was going to be feasible to do that. But
well, good.
But check out Zeus's Instagram, Zeus the Surf Dog, whenever you get a chance.
I'll see if I can get the wife to subscribe to it. I think she's on Instagram. I'm not on anything.
Yeah,
he's pretty cool. He's a dog that surfs. That's for sure.
My dogs are lazy as shit. My dogs don't do any of that. That one's been sleeping like a cat lately. She's getting so old.
Yeah. All right, guys. Good chat. We'll talk to you
appreciate
shortly,
it.
then. Appreciate having
Thanks,
you on the
Alex.
show.
Have a good one.
See you guys. Bye.
Later.
This is the Veteran Talk Show. If you or someone you love is suffering as a victim of sexual harassment, sexual assault, needs help with addiction and recovery, or mental health and well-being, then please go to veterantalkshow.com/resources. This show is hosted, produced, and edited by Ryan Smeltz. Our co-host is Joe Ballack, and a guest starring veterans.